Good. Fire up your
You do a mic test, everyone? Make sure.
Check 1, 2. Turn up to maybe 3/4 on your mics.
Going good.
Oh,
Test,
you
test.
good?
Test,
There you go. Well done.
Check 1, 2. Hello. All right. Yeah, that's live. All right. Good evening. We will call this this regular meeting of the City Plan Commission to order. Today's June 18th. We'll start with a roll call. Noel Sanchez. Will Sherry. Dave Caldwell.
Miguel Casado. Cheyenne Mandracar, DPD staff.
Robert Azar, staff.
Sharon Gardner, legal counsel.
And I'm Michael Gazdaco, chair. We don't have any minutes to approve. I don't believe we're going to have a director's report. I think we're just going to get into agenda item number 1, which is the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The moment we've all been waiting for quite some time. What we're going to do is have a little bit of an introduction presentation by staff, and then we'll get right into public comment. So to kick us off, we have Planning Director Joe Mulligan.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the members of the public who are able to come this evening, but also who have been able to comment and participate in the crafting of this comprehensive plan document. And thank you for the members of the commission who are here tonight to review and make a determination on that. The process has been going on for about 2 years now. So a 2-year startup and deliberation and review for a plan that should last us for the next decade moving forward. And what is occurred over that period of time is a substantial amount of community outreach, including well over 80 public engagements with the community. The comp plan by requirement is 1 or 2 community engagements, and that's what you'll get in most communities. But Providence has gone far beyond in order that we could reach out to as many folks and as many interested parties throughout the city of Providence and beyond. We've got comments from visitors and others who are also have an appreciation for this great city. The chapters that have been provided were prepared by subject matter experts throughout the city, different department heads and their staff, reviewed internally and reviewed by the community and the public with the commentary and the edits that have come forward over the last several months and have been incorporated into the document that will be reviewed and discussed this evening. We believe that this document, based on the amount of input that we've received and the thoughtful incorporation of the comments, as well as the structure and the overall content that has been provided, is this comprehensive plan, as we have it documented today, we believe meets the moment in which Providence has got to plan for its future in a time of uncertainty in which our downtown businesses are adjusting to a post-pandemic world of work from home, where prices have gone far beyond the affordability for many residents here, including rental costs in the midst of a housing crisis. And this plan really positions, more so than probably any plan in Providence's modern history, to position it in a substantial way for growth that we believe is equitable, fair, and the right thing to do. And in addition, it addresses concerns about our economic growth, about our physical form, about our open space, about mobility, about transportation, and all the issues that we have come to love and appreciate about this city. So I'm hoping as the evening progresses, I'm sure there'll be lots of comments from those who are present today, as well as deliberation by the commission. But if we approach this, this is a moment in time for the plan in which it is reviewed by the commission and then advanced to city council for further review and adoption. So we're hoping that the conversation, the dialogue is one that appreciates the work that's been put in, is cognizant of all the accommodations that are made, not only from the commentary, but for those who might not be in the room, and for those whose voices aren't here, who aren't present, and appreciates the balance that we have to provide between public commentary and the interests of the city as a whole. Although we are a great city and comprised of many individuals, we have to look at things in a collective way, in a spirit that is respectful and cooperative of all those different issues that are inputted into this. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Tim Shea, who's going to run through some presentations here to update folks on the current plan, maybe a little bit of review of how far we've come over time, and a little preview of what we're going to experience moving forward. And I also would like to thank Bob Azar and his staff for the tremendous amount of work that's been put into this plan and the adoption of cumulative decades of experience and a great love and affinity for the city of Providence. And thanks to the commission staff for taking your time and the amount of effort that you put into this deliberation. And I appreciate all your time as well. Thank you.
And just a shout out to our friends over at Providence's Department of Public Property for the new chairs. For those of you who might have food or drink, please be respectful of these chairs. We hope that they won't be stained like the last ones, at least for the next few months.
They need to last until the next comp plan update. So
That's a good goal. Put that in.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Joe, Bob, and the commission for having us here today. As Joe alluded, I'm going to share a brief introduction to remind us about the process that brought us here today and give a short overview of the draft plan as it is before Deputy Director Azar discusses the feedback we've received so far and some of the changes that have been made in response to that feedback. So the draft before you today is informed by a participation process that took place over several years. It was designed to be inclusive, collaborative, meet people where they are in their neighborhoods and iterate throughout the whole process, from listening to how we all experience the city change and identify key issues, to brainstorming collaboratively solutions to those issues, to now sharing out those draft proposals and asking for feedback. So methods have really varied throughout this process, from tabling at your at neighborhood block parties to workshops co-hosted with community organizations and elected officials, to online engagement and more. And a few key takeaways that we've heard throughout this process, and I've repeated to the commission before, so I won't dwell on them too long. But Providence residents are, we're fiercely proud of our city. We love our communities, their diversity, their culture, their walkability. But the city is changing, as all cities do, and not always for the better. So we heard a lot about issues around housing affordability. It's a top issue in every neighborhood, improving our transportation system, preparing for climate change, and much more. But we've transitioned now from this period of community feed-in to community feedback on proposals, and we've come to you with a draft plan that has 9 different elements. So we're trying to guide change through this roadmap of goals and objectives and strategies across these topic areas. And just briefly to kind of sum up I'm going to attempt in the next few minutes to just sum up a sentence for each of these elements to give you a quick reminder as we've introduced the draft chapters in recent months. But in our chapter on sustainability, resilience, and the environment, we're really preparing for climate change. We're enhancing the natural environment by incorporating best practices in reducing fossil fuel emissions, improving resilience to extreme weather, more on environmental conservation, and importantly, centering equity and environmental justice. In the built environment, we aim to preserve and enhance Providence's unique urban design through improved design standards and review processes, embracing adaptive reuse of buildings and green building practices, expanding preservation efforts and historic districts. And then economic development strategies here aim to adapt and grow the city's economy through attention to key sectors like the blue and green economy, life sciences, arts and culture, but also workforce and small business development, improvements to city services and infrastructure. Housing is a very important area that's discussed later in land use, but also has its own chapter that focused on responding to the crisis that we face by encouraging the production of new units and the rehabilitation of existing units, with particular focus on expanding long-term deed-restricted affordable housing, housing for people with special needs, housing near transit, and housing design that considers energy efficiency and accessibility. The mobility chapter seeks to accelerate the city's transition to a multimodal transportation system that improves safety and connections for all modes of transportation, that increases transit and residents who use transit, who walk, who bike, and codifies a lot of local, state, and federal plans and guidelines that really emphasize a transition to complete streets. In our arts and culture chapter, we codify goals and strategies that were created recently by the creative community in the city themselves that aim to foster a vibrant and artistic culture in our city while centering the well-being of artists and culture bearers and creatives to all of our benefit, to civic life in the city, to the vibrancy of our neighborhoods, to the vibrancy of public spaces, and much more. In people and public spaces, we try to continue investing in and expanding the city's park system with programming and infrastructure that's responsive to the needs of our diverse community, with investments in green infrastructure and stormwater management in these spaces, with improved access and links between our parks, and opportunities for community participation throughout and design of new parks and maintenance, in programming. And then as we move into community services and facilities, we outline ways to improve the quality and coordination of several different forms of city services and public facilities, from our water system to school buildings to our 3-on-1 system itself. And finally, in the land use chapter, the chapter here, responds to that question of where and how should Providence grow, with proposals to make it easier to build housing and mixed-use development across our city, while broadly still respecting the built environment and quality of life in our neighborhoods. Building types that we allow here range from accessory dwelling units in all residential areas to missing middle housing types, including duplexes and small multifamilies, to larger scale mixed use transit oriented development where appropriate along key corridors. And then in industrial land use, the draft outlines a shift toward prioritizing the growth of cleaner and more sustainable forms of industry and transitioning away from carbon intensive sectors. So as you can see, a lot is covered in this draft plan, and a lot of intention and thought went into it, both on the behalf of our planning staff and city departments, but also on behalf of the members of the public who participated in this process over the last few years. All of whom shared thoughtful feedback and ideas early in the process, and feedback later in the process. And so just briefly in the last few months, as we've been sharing out the draft chapters, I just have some numbers on the feedback that we've received before I hand it over to dive into this feedback a little further. So we've gotten about 75 comments at various city plan commissions as we unveiled draft chapters. We held 5 feedback events at libraries around the city, Northeast, Southwest, and Central. And then we set up a standing exhibit here in the building. And through that process, we received about 275 comments. And then we've also had individuals and community organizations submitting letters and submitting their ideas and feedback on these chapters. So I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Director Azar, who's going to talk us through a bit of this feedback and some changes.
Great, thank you, Tim. And also thanks to everybody for coming out tonight and joining us online. I think there are probably many of you, maybe a dozen or more, who have been at every single one of these meetings, and I give you a lot of credit for that. I get paid to do this, you guys don't, and I really appreciate that you have that kind of dedication to follow along with us and hopefully at least understand, if not completely support everything we're doing. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the addendum that we published on June 11th. This was in response to comments that we had received up to probably about a week before that. Then after I talk about this, I'm going to talk about other comments that have come in since we published the addendum. So with respect to land use, there were a lot of comments about specifically industrial uses and their impact on neighborhoods that are next to industrial areas. So we have made some changes to clarify that uses that conflict with public health and/or climate goals may be prohibited. We're not saying they shall be prohibited. We're saying they may be prohibited. That is a determination that will be made in the next phase, which is the formulation of the zoning changes that come out of this. I want to stress that we believe that industrial uses should exist in the city, but that they should abide by environmental regulations. If they can't, then this opens the door to further regulating them. So we've added language there about that. We've added language referring to the cumulative impacts of different types of uses. And we have also outlined future efforts to encourage clean, sustainable, and resilient industry. With respect to land use, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We finally included the historic district, the overlay map that includes adding 36 individually listed National Register properties into the historic district. And then we added 6 strategies with respect to rail, bicycling, and driving in the mobility section. Okay, so then as I mentioned, we've received some additional feedback. They have been in 3 general categories, and I want to address each one of these bullets. A lot of the comments were in the first column came from the Providence Preservation Society. With respect to expanding historic districts, so they would like us to talk a lot more about National Register districts because they are distributed more evenly throughout the city than our local historic districts. So a couple of things. First of all, we do identify all National Register districts in the appendix. We don't, it's important to distinguish National Register districts from local historic districts because without a local historic district, we don't have any regulatory authority. So local historic districts are the tool that are used at the local level. With respect to National Register and local historic districts, there are 36 properties we're proposing to add to our local historic districts. One is a request from a homeowner, and the remaining 35 represent all of the individually listed National Register properties that are not already in local historic districts. So the aim is that all individually listed National Register historic properties be in historic districts. That's included. And then we are continuing to evaluate new districts and new types of districts on an ongoing basis. All right, adaptive reuse. We talk about adaptive reuse throughout this plan in the sustainability section, the built environment section, the housing section, and in the land use section. So I do think that it's something that we stress. In addition, we have just implemented new regulations that allow for the adaptive reuse of non-residential buildings into residential in all zoning districts. That's one of those provisions that came to us from the General Assembly. So I think we're very strong on adaptive reuse. With respect to demolition, we mentioned a number of times demolition in the built environment section, in the housing section, in the land use section. In general, what we're saying is discourage demolition, especially demolition of housing, and also enforce, come up with new enforcement tools against illegal demolition. Okay. With respect to a citizen design review committee, this was a recommendation from PPS. I want to start off by saying that we have a very strong tradition of design review in our historic districts, the Capital Center District, the Downtown District, and the I-195 Commission has carried on that tradition. We also have in Providence a tradition where there are some voluntary organizations that do design review. The WBNA and PPS have committees. We have, at the end of last year, we implemented new tools for the City Plan Commission to conduct design review, particularly when it finds there are adverse impacts to the built environment. And also when developers are asking for additional development capacity. This body has the ability to do that. We have a builder, we have someone with real estate experience, actually 2 builders, and we have an architect on this board. So I think that you will see a lot more attention being paid to design with projects that come in front of this. For projects that don't come in front of this board, since January, we have implemented new practices within the department where every significant new building gets reviewed by professionals in the planning department and the zoning department. One an architect and another a specialist in urban design. And I have to say that project has yielded some very good results. So respectfully, we don't believe that there should be yet another level of design review. Okay. I'm now on the last bullet in the first column, very concerned about the impact of density. In the built environment, the housing, the land use section, we talk about density, what it means, where it's appropriate. And we talk about the fact that we need to maintain the city's character as we add new development. We say that multiple times. And I would say that that's kind of the core of the comprehensive plan. If you had to sum up the comprehensive plan in one sentence, it would be encourage and accommodate growth while preserving the best of Providence. And in order to do that, we have to direct growth to certain areas, and that's what we do, and I think we do it in a very thoughtful way. Okay, next, we're into the second column. A lot of these comments come from a form letter that has been rolling in over the past couple of days. I think we got maybe 30 or 40 of these. I want to address the comments in that form letter. Okay, first, they call for reducing lot size requirements. We've already done a lot of this. In 2022, we eliminated the requirement for merger of undersized contiguous lots. That opened up perhaps 1,000 properties to be developed where the law prevented them from being developed previously. In 2023, we eliminated rules that reduce the number of units allowed on undersized lots. That's in response to the state law changes. For example, on a 3,200 square foot lot in a 3-family zone, you could get 1 unit. Now you can get 3. Okay. We're also proposing to allow for ADUs. The state just required it. We were moving ahead with that anyway. This will allow thousands of new units. They call for legalizing duplexes. Duplexes will be legal in all residential zones except for R1, but we're going to allow for accessory dwelling units in R1. So if you have a single family home and an ADU, that's 2 units. That's the same number of units as a duplex. So our single family zones will essentially become single family plus ADU, 2-family, call it what you will, 2 units, okay? Legalize small multifamily buildings. We're proposing to do that by special use permit in R3 and by right in R4. We're rezoning 2,800 properties to R4. Legalize semi-detached single-family homes. We propose that row houses be allowed in single-family zones, all residential zones, in fact. Semi-detached is a type of row house, so that's proposed. Allow 4-story buildings in medium-density neighborhoods. This would be the R3 zone. We respectfully disagree. There's not very much precedent whatsoever for doing this in the 3-family zones. Some areas that we're proposing for change to R4, like Federal Hill, do have some 4-story residential buildings. 4-story would be allowed in R4, but for R3, we think you can get a lot of density and a lot of units in 3 stories without having a jarring effect on the built environment. 4 stories on a street of 1-story ranch houses, of which we have many in this city, I think might be a little too far. Proactively address student housing supply. Okay, in all commercial zones, we allow high density student housing, and we supported additional height for student housing when it's in conjunction with commercial uses. You've approved a couple of those projects. So student housing in commercial zones, great idea. High density, great idea. We also propose strategies to require colleges and universities to develop plans for additional on-campus student housing. That's in the plan. Legalize more apartments on all high-frequency bus lines. We already do this. We allow for buildings up to 70 feet tall in the TOD zone with the ability to go 24 feet higher for affordable housing or other amenities. In other corridors, we allow 4 stories by right or 6 stories through incentives. That's a lot of density. That's a lot of height. And we think we've gone far enough. I just want to talk for a minute about the potential build out of our land use plan. It's almost impossible to do a complete build out analysis because you have to make so many assumptions about what's being built. Are you demolishing everything and building new to the new standards? Obviously not. So we make some assumptions, okay? R1 and R1A, through ADU alone, the potential is about 7,400 new units because there are I'm just going to give you some figures without getting into how I calculate it. The rezonings from R1 to R3 or from R2 to R3, that's over 11,000 properties. Every one of those could get perhaps 1, maybe 2 more units. So conservatively, there's a potential for 11,000 units in the R3 zone. In the R4 zone, like I said, 2,800 properties being rezoned. Conservatively in the R4 zone, 2 units, 3 units, 4 units, times 2,700, okay? So we're talking in residential zones alone, the potential for upwards of 20,000 new units through this. We have in place for commercial, downtown, TOD, MMU zones allow for high density already. I would argue that combined, they can easily accommodate tens of thousands of new units on vacant and redeveloped properties. In the C zone, the TOD zone and downtown, they're all near and supportive of high frequency transit. We've been working on calibrating our zoning for decades, and this is just the next phase. But to give you a sense of what gets built in the city, right now we have 63 residential projects in the pipeline. That's 3,650 units, 2,800 market, almost 900 affordable. About a quarter of it is affordable, which is actually extremely high for Providence. I'd consider that to be a good thing. Of those 63, 18 are under construction. That's 745 units out of 3,650, okay? I don't know how many of those 3,650 are gonna get built. You guys approve tons of projects that never get built. Is that because of zoning? No, you approve them. They're compliant with zoning. Other factors are in play. Providence, it's kind of a sad fact. We produce 400 to 500 units a year. Okay, if these 745 get built, that's not a year. That's over a couple of years. So the new changes will allow for a lot of development to be easier, more streamlined. So I would argue that that is not gonna be the biggest constraint to development. I believe that more important factors are construction costs, labor, materials, interest rates, building codes. We all know, and are, you know, a lot of us, I think, are very disappointed that legislation failed at the State House. Let's get back to it next year with regard to sprinklers and such. Taxes, let's face it, that's an impediment. And probably the most important thing is the cost and the availability of land in Providence. We're not making new land in Providence. That will continue to be an obstacle. There are people who hold on to land and are not interested in developing it any more than it's developed. I would say that's probably the most important factor with respect to production. Okay, just sort of rounding this out, the last column here, mobility comments, okay. Parking minimums, they're on the table. We talk about it in the comp plan. We're gonna get to that in the zoning phase. Do we want to eliminate all parking minimums in Providence? Let's have that discussion. We call for the better utilization of on-street parking and the development of surface parking lots. So that is definitely something we're working on. Restricting right turn on red, we talk about it in the comp plan where possible. Where unrestricted turns are detrimental to pedestrian safety. Okay, and then finally, there was an objection about, you know, talking about support for a new transit center. We feel comfortable with this language. We say support RIPTA in its process to establish a new world-class transit center that meets the need of RIPTA operations, transit users, and Providence's planning and economic development goals. We're happy with that language and we stand by it. Okay, so that's it. That's where we are. And I think at this point, we're ready to start taking public comment.
Okay, I'd like to echo a sentiment before we open it up that is appreciative of the work that's been put in and appreciative of all of the input that has been given to date. And I know we're going to hear more this evening. This has been an iterative process. This has been a compromising process. So it's funny as I read through, not funny, I have to find levity in certain things in order to keep this process going forward. But I see opposing sides of the same issue, unhappy with one thing or the other that the other still wouldn't be happy with if it was changed. So I believe that a lot of compromise has gone into this last addendum, and I want to give credit to the planning department for the work that went into that. We are never going to have 100% acceptance that this is exactly what we want. That's just not going to happen. We all have different points of view. We all, does this go as far as I want it to go? Not really, but I think it's a really good start to get us where we need to go in the next 10 years. And then we'll take another look at it again. So I want to thank the planning department and the staff that put in all the time and effort to make this. I know legal department has been working in the background as well to make sure that this complies with state law, which is actually a big thing that it needs to. With that, we will be opening it up to public comment, and there's a sign-in sheet which I have here. We're going to do the normal course. I would like to, at the beginning, I would ask everyone that we all act with the respect and decorum that is appropriate for this, and not personally attack any one group or people. This is supposed to be a collaborative meeting, and I think you can make your point without direct attacks on one side or another. Let's keep this civil. We're all here for the same goal, which is to make this the best comprehensive plan that we can at this time and place. And obviously, my crystal ball's been broken for a long time. So I don't know what's going to come down in 10 years that's gonna change our view, as we sit here today. But I think we're at a good starting point. So with that, we were gonna call people up. We're gonna have a 2-minute, time limit as normal. There are a lot of people who want to speak on this comprehensive plan update again tonight. And I'm thankful for that. And if we have enough time, maybe we'll open it up again. But I think, like I said, I think we're in pretty good shape right now, and there has been a lot of compromise to date. So first off, we're going to call up Councilman Miguel Sanchez is in the crowd, and I believe he has a special request for us this evening.
Miguel Youngs from our policy staff is going to join me.
Yes, absolutely. No, we. Yeah, I'll put you on.
Yo.
And if you, just before you start, if you didn't get a chance to sign up and you do want to speak, there will be time at the end where we'll call people up after we exhaust the sign-in sheet and things like that. So don't worry about that, and we'll get to the online. Everyone will get a chance to speak. All right, with that, Councilman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to echo the remarks of gratitude, to obviously our planning department and all the staff. Whether you agree or disagree, a lot of work and time and hours have, played into this process over, I would say, the past 2-3 years at this point. And of course, the members of this committee that play a very crucial role. And then most importantly, obviously, all the, neighbors here that have been so engaged throughout this process. All of us as Providence residents know how dire the housing crisis is right now. So I think that's where majority of the testimony is going to come to play today. And of course, stuff around transportation and our environment is just as important. But what I'm here today is to make a request. So for folks that don't know or aren't aware, in Ward 6, there's about 300 lots that are zoned R1. And what I've been doing, working with neighbors over the past, even before I became a city councilor, I was already talking to neighbors and thinking through this to make it to R2 or even R3. To encourage, to give people the freedom to build a multifamily if they want. No one in my neighborhood, even maybe across the city, is building a one-family home right now, just because of some of the points that were mentioned before in regards to interest rates and material costs and labor right now. So what I want to do is give neighbors in my ward the opportunity, and I would say about 50, if not a little bit more percentage wise of these plots are vacant land. So there is an interest to develop, to build multifamily housing in my neighborhood. And this is what we should be doing across the city. But obviously, as the representative of my neighborhood, I'm going to start there and then hopefully keep that momentum going across the city. Just before I go ahead, my own personal opinion, especially with how dire the crisis is right now, a city like Providence, an urban community that's facing some of the challenges, shouldn't have any exclusively single family zoning. Of course, if you want to build a single family home in an R2 and R3, you're more than welcome. But we should definitely be giving folks the opportunity to build a multi-unit property if they would choose to. The need and the market is definitely there for it. But jumping into my specific request, this request was submitted to the council back in maybe February, March, and my goal was and is to get this moving ahead of the overall comp plan. Just because of the engagement that I've had with my neighbors up to this point, folks are pretty comfortable. And I will say that there is some concerns, but as an elected official, it's important to talk to neighbors about those concerns. And I mean, the harsh reality is that any housing development is going to bring some sort of concerns or criticisms. But as an elected official, I take a lot of pride in engaging in those difficult conversations. but also making the difficult decision. It's not difficult for me because I know it's the right thing. But politically, just speaking, sometimes it's not the easy one to make. But with how many neighbors we're seeing in the streets right now with the increase in rents and the lack of home ownership opportunities, it's critical that we all do our part to encourage more housing. So that's really my request is to separate the Ward 6 zone amendment out of this comp plan and vote on it and hopefully approve it separately to hopefully get this rolling a little quicker once it comes back to council. I have folks that are waiting on this change that have bought in property over the past few years, are ready to start building, and I want to try to speed that up as much as possible. So I don't know if there's any questions, concerns. I don't know, Bob, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think you expressed it and we've included that in our staff report, so we can address that with a separate vote at the end.
And that's what's proposed in the staff report.
Cool.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the councilman while he's here? Based on that?
Do we have a map of that?
I can pull up I can pull this up on, so we have the comprehensive plan map, I'm sorry, the proposed, zoning mapper that's online, that's available, on the City Plan Commission's website, shows all the areas that are proposed. And the area that the councilman is talking about is south of Triggs Golf Course, and it's an area of single family zoning, and it's kind of sandwiched between 2 and 3 family zoning that we're proposing to go all to R3. His original proposal was to go to R2, but we're going one better than that because we're proposing for R2 to all go to R3. And there's a lot of these in this particular area of the city. Many of these properties are undeveloped. There's a lot of outcroppings and ledge that have made it historically difficult to develop. There have been some inroads. And I think,
we've seen a few projects come before.
yeah, we've
us
seen a few projects and with discrete little zoning changes, so this would be that whole area.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Bob, that you mentioned at the end. That the cost to build these 2-family homes is extremely high right now. And that's a really hard reality for me as well, is that folks that are gonna buy these homes, it's not gonna be at a super affordable that most of my neighbors will be able to afford. But I understand the reality of supply right now. So to encourage that as much as possible. And more importantly, having those relationships with those developers to hold them accountable, to making sure that they build in a safe way, because there has been some concerns on some of the ledge and the infrastructure that's needed for some of this area. But I'm very, very engaged with those developers and neighbors. I live on in a R1. Across the street is R2. So I mean, this is literally my neighborhood. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions, any comments, concerns.
And obviously, you're in support of the R3 in lieu of the R2, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's been mentioned already about how that really doesn't change much in terms of some of the building code difficulties that, I mean, it's almost impossible for a builder to build an R3 right now and make any money. But I think it's important
to change in the very near future.
I hope so. I mean, I think as city elected officials, we need to do a better job next year at the State House in championing that change.
Thank you. I do want to give a shout out to the interactive tool as well. It's pretty cool if you play around with it. We didn't talk about that much. We kind of glossed over it, but that's a fun little feature that was put online between last meeting and this meeting that it's fun to play with. Any other questions for the councilman before we open up the rest of the public comments? All right, thank you, Councilman.
Thank you,
Appreciate
committee
your
members.
time.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go right into the list. I'm gonna say the person that's up, and then I'm gonna announce the person on deck, like I've been doing in previous meetings. So Jackie Goldman, you are up, and Carla Di Stefano maybe is on deck. Oh, Carla Di Stefano, yes.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jackie Goldman. I live over Mount Pleasant and I work as a public health researcher in Lower South Providence, where I do mostly work with people who use drugs, a lot of people who are unhoused. And so a lot of my comments come from that vantage point. I'm really excited about these discussions of upzoning. One of the things that I think is missing, especially in discussions of affordable housing, is talking about what kind of affordable housing. We see Providence building a lot of workforce housing and calling that affordable when that truly is not affordable for the average person. If the median income in this city is $40,000, building housing that is for people making $70,000 and over does not actually do a whole lot at bridging affordability. So I'd like to see some language specificity around specifically low income affordable housing, and even talking about like what percentage AMI that means, right? So people making 20 to 80% of AMI and not just people making 80% and over, because this is a real need in our community, especially because a lot of people are not making the kinds of money that are required to even get to that sort of workforce housing threshold. Another thing that I would like to see is not having any more tax stabilization agreements. So TSA shift the top property tax burden from large developers to small scale property owners. I've done a lot of community canvassing, and I've talked to people who are homeowners, and even though they own their houses outright, can no longer afford to live in them because the tax burdens have gotten so high. I'm thinking of older folks, people who've, like, as I said, been in these neighborhoods for years and years. We need to make sure that the people who are living in the city are the ones who can keep affording to live here, and not just subsidizing these large scale developers who are building the kinds of housing that people cannot afford. We need to have housing that is truly affordable. So even if we are going to do TSAs, like, we need to have the like low income affordable housing piece in it, and not just let people skate away with this sort of workforce housing. Another thing that I'm thinking a lot about is, and I don't know how much the comprehensive plan can do with this, I've not been able to come to all the meetings, is thinking about the use of police and encampment sweeps. So as I said, I work with a lot of unhoused people, and one of the barriers time and time again is these sweeps where they're losing all of their possessions, they're losing IDs, and they're having to restart the processes of going into like coordinated entry over and over. We should not be using police to essentially make our neighbors in situations that are dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla Di Stefano, and Sarah Engel is on deck.
Good evening. My name is Carla Di Stefano. I'm the Executive Director of SWAP, Stop Wasting Abandoned Property in South Providence. To members of the commission, the staff, I want to echo all the positive comments about the work that has gone into this plan. There's a whole bunch of really good stuff. A couple of you here are probably not going to be surprised at the thing I'm going to pick at, so I'll just go right at it. I'm going to read right from my memo. And I have copies for all of you if you wish to have them. This is the fourth comprehensive plan in which I have personally participated in both the process and execution with regard to the development of affordable housing and neighborhood revitalization in Providence and other neighborhoods in the city. In 2025, SWAP will celebrate its 50th anniversary. In the last 30 of these years, SWAP has been responsible for the investment of nearly $190 million in single and multifamily homes sold to low-income families, 500 units of affordable rental apartments, the majority of which were existing 2- and 3-family homes, 10 multi-unit residential mixed-use commercial corridor buildings with community business and service spaces. I think it is fair to say that our organization has a pretty strong record of responding to the goals in each of the comp plans in effect through those years. But try as we might, we have never been able to say, quote, we have to start to advertise. There are not enough people to fill our affordable apartments. And the list is longer now than ever, as is the wait list for people to buy the affordable homes for sale that we build and renovate. Our buyers and our renters are individuals and families who earn household income in the range of $25,000 to $60,000 a year. This makes them fall between 30 and up to about 70% area median income. And they are the workforce of the city of Providence and our state for the services every one of us expects to be available every single day. They are teachers and teachers' aides. They are daycare providers, bank tellers, firefighters, police officers, retail and food service workers, and CNAs. The planning department over all of these years has done an amazing job of tracking and presenting data about where we are and where we have to go to do better and be just more wonderful. But as I stand here or sit here today, having reviewed this draft and the plans of 2010 and 2007, which was an interim, the language is the same about increasing affordable housing. It is the old adage, why would anyone think if we just say and do the same thing decade after decade that anything will change? And I quote, 2024, this plan, continue to support programs that encourage developers to build housing that is affordable to all, including by evaluating the market feasibility of inclusionary zoning. 2010, consider creating requirements and or incentives for the development of affordable housing in conjunction with the development of market rate units. 2007, I won't read it because it's identical to 2010. The Wall Street Journal reported today in only 4 metro areas of 1 million people, Louisville, Hartford, Providence, and Honolulu, have new lease rents risen 5% or more on average this year. It's time to provide the political will and determination to include affordable rental apartments in each and every development of 20 units or more in the city. Inclusionary zoning is a 4-letter word to developers. Too bad, because this comp plan should be about bold and doing the right thing. It can be financially feasible. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Engel, you are up, and Linda Perry, you are on deck.
Should I leave this up?
Leave that with Troy.
There's one.
Right, great.
Good evening.
Hi, Sarah Engel. I'm the Executive Director of Planning at RIPTA and a city resident. So I just wanted to share a couple thoughts on the mobility chapter, which there is so much to love in this chapter, from advocate for funding for transit to advocate for increased transit frequency and span and crosstown service and priority infrastructure. And the list goes on. We work really, really closely with the planning staff and public works staff here on an ongoing basis, and they are fantastic. Bob and his team are fantastic. Tim is fantastic. So really, like, almost exclusively good things to say. There's a couple concepts that I feel like it would be fantastic if they were a little more strongly coming through in the mobility section. And one of them is sort of the collaborative nature of implementing transportation solutions in a city, especially in a downtown. As I just mentioned, we work really closely with city planning staff as well as RIDOT, state roads, intersections. Anytime you do ground disturbance, if you're putting in a bus stop or changing signalization, it's really impossible to do the work of public transit in a vacuum. So I have a specific suggestion for how that might be addressed. Second issue is really climate, not just the decarbonization of the transportation sector, but mode shift in general. So there's wonderful language in the plan that's before you today that talks about supporting transit and making it more user friendly. I think it would be great if there also could be some specific language just referencing the climate benefits of growing transit mode share. And I have a specific suggestion around that. And then there's a couple places that are just really high level to the degree that, they're
Give you
not.
A little bit more time because
Okay,
you are
and
speaking
yeah,
from
sorry,
a
I'm-
RIPTA standpoint, and we want to hear from you. We've talked about you a lot, and we want to hear from you.
Okay, and I know, and
You haven't
I
been in the
know, yeah, sorry that I haven't been more engaged all along. But we have been sort of talking to staff. So, I have some places where maybe we could fill in the blanks a little bit on some of the specifics that I think are really positive that you might want to have in the plan, but, so if you would like, I can read the 3 recommendations into the record. If not, I've provided them
High
to
level,
staff.
as long as you've given them to staff also, I'm sure we'll be able to reflect upon them.
Okay, yeah, I'll read word for word
Okay.
what I shared earlier today. Strategy A refers to encouraging RIPTA and the state to improve the transit experience in Rhode Island. And really, I had sort of 2 thoughts on this. One was, and this is in the area of just increasing specificity and particularly around both the collaborative nature of doing the work of transportation as well as addressing our climate goals as a city and as a state, potentially rewording to work with RIPTA, RIDOT, and the community to prioritize and implement, and I know it's not the city's role necessarily to implement, but key transit improvements so as to encourage transit ridership and address climate goals. Strategy B refers to advocating for funding. And actually this one, I haven't really set this one up, but my only suggestion here is there's a reference to the annual cost estimate for the transportation or for the transit improvements that are recommended by the transit master plan. I didn't see a lot of other places in the draft comp plan where specific dollar amounts were mentioned. And so this felt a little awkward to me to call it out here. But maybe more to the point, we're actually going to be updating those cost estimates in conjunction with updating the long range transportation plan. The state planning division is starting to work on that now. There's going to be public engagement over the summer, but also we'll be updating ridership and cost estimates. So it's okay with me if those numbers are not in. It's also okay with me if they stay. And then the third suggestion was, and this actually goes up to the objective, and it does some tying all of this together. The current wording is encourage bus service improvements such that it is a reasonable transportation option for many trips in Providence and makes up a higher share of trips than in 2024. Shaped ever so slightly against the phrasing reasonable transportation option. Because for many it is currently, and we hope in the future that it will be more reasonable for more people, for more trips. But, and then again, just bringing specificity, my proposal is, and happy to wordsmith, is encourage increased frequency, reliability, and comfort of bus service such that the share of transit trips in Providence increases relative to single occupancy vehicle trips. And so that gets a little bit of the mode shift in there, but also probably most importantly, the things that I think would most benefit Providence residents and visitors, that frequency and reliability of the service, just to put that kind of front and center. So those are the suggestions, and thank you so much for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
And I think it was worthwhile to give you a little bit more. You haven't been able to speak on these other iterations, so we appreciate you coming here and giving us a little bit of the feel from the state agency that we speak to a lot in that section of the plan. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll have to visit more often. It's good to meet you all.
We like it. Yeah, you're welcome to
Absolutely.
come anytime. You are often the subject of our discussions. All right, up next, and not everyone does get a standing like an ovation like that. That's it's. I feel like we're really getting this civility is on display tonight.
Drop off some,
Absolutely. Do you-
some images, thanks. There's extras, so everybody could take a look as I.
Cedric, you're on deck.
No, Julian's next. Hello, everybody. My name is Linda Perry, and I am a 40-plus year resident of Washington Park in South Providence. And I want to thank the board and everyone and Tim for doing all of this over the years. There's a couple of issues that are predominant in my neighborhood. One is the building, the uncontrolled building that I'm calling it, jamming houses into small spaces. The drainage issue is not in the residential zoning code and should be, in my opinion. I've had personal experience about that with my yard flooding because of a runway of asphalt behind me. And I think a lot of you guys know about that problem. The photographs that I gave you was just, I happened to be driving by on Ohio Avenue, and there's a horrible building going up that has a giant basement. It's a two-family, it could be a three, and I'm sure it will be. And the reason I photographed this initially was because of the disgusting way it was left for a very long time. And I know that's not your purview, but the issue of the building, the staircase on the side, literally on the sidewalk. And in the name of density, our neighborhood is going to the dogs. And everybody can see that as you drive around. Every conceivable lot is being jammed in with a house, and they don't really care about green space left around the house, around the property. So that is a major issue. The other issue is the port, and I'm going to refer to Julian in the sustainability department to discuss in depth. I fully support the sustainability's position on what we have and what we should see in the port area.
Thank you very much. All right, next up is Cedric Gee, and Julian, you're on deck.
Hello, good evening to the members of the CPC.
You're still my favorite high school student.
Thank you so much. My name is Cedric. I'm a 15-year-old student, and I live in Wayland, and I wanted to speak in support of your approval of the land use chapter of the comp plan and support of additional housing reforms. First, I want to thank the city staff who worked on the comp plan and this body for how much effort and time you put into making this such a robust public engagement process. And whether we agree, disagree, I really appreciate all the effort and time that you put into this entire process. So I also submitted a written letter, so I just wanted to briefly summarize and elaborate on stuff that I learned at this meeting.
Yeah, we're familiar.
Okay, thank you. So over the big public engagement process last year, housing affordability was ranked as the single highest priority for Providence residents. According to the chart, it was more than twice as many people ranked that than managing growth. And it's easy to recognize why, because Providence literally had the single highest rent increase in the nation at 22% from last year. And you will hear from so many other people in this room about how the housing crisis is displacing and dividing our communities. So I'm not going to elaborate on that. But so this is why I'm incredibly supportive of many of the housing reform efforts that are currently in the comp plan, including consolidating the R2 and R3 zones, legalizing townhomes, legalizing small apartments in more areas, with expanding R4, especially on Gano Street and Wayland, and legalizing ADUs, and also efforts to eliminate parking minimums. I outlined in my letter, I talked about more about how Minneapolis, Portland, and many other cities have successfully and measurably reduced rents by implementing many of the reforms in the comp plan. In many ways, the comp plan doesn't actually go far enough. there are and there are many, I still would like to see reduced lot sizes to match what has already been enacted in peer cities like Burlington. Oh, sorry, I'll summarize. So in summary, just the comp plan is a in every 10-year opportunity to address our unprecedented housing crisis. And it may be our last opportunity, because if the housing crisis continues for another 10 years, the city might become unrecognizable, and we might permanently displace our beloved community members. So I urge you to strongly support and approve the comp plan mobility chapter, and advocate for a comprehensive plan that prioritizes housing affordability over opinions about neighborhood character. Thank you so much for your time and everything you do for the city.
Thank you. Julian Drix, you're up next, and Justin Baptista, you are on deck.
Hello, thank you all, commissioners and the Department of Planning for all of your work on this, echoing a lot of the gratitude that others have already shared. My name is Julian Drix. Last time I testified here, I was speaking as an individual. Today, I'm here officially speaking on behalf of the city's Sustainability Commission. So speaking commission to commission, I wanted to thank you for your diligence and work on this. As you likely know, the commission, since my last testimony, discussed this multiple times, met with planning, and thanks to members of the planning department who came to meet with us. And we sent a 15-page letter with a 5-page letter, 7 pages of data on particular census tracts that are ranked in the top 5% nationwide in terms of the severity of the environmental inequity and injustice in those areas, and the cumulative impacts of pollution and other social stressors. And then 3 pages of specific details for language changes. As we make clear in that letter, the history of environmental injustice and inequity in Providence is long-standing and historical, so it is not the fault of anyone in this room today, but it is the duty of everyone with a position of power in the city today to work on making it better, knowing that this is a long-term process. Wanted to thank the planning department for the work that's been done to respond to the comment letter that we sent in, and know that there was the presentation earlier today of the addendum with a few changes that have been made in recommendation in response to those specific comments around industrial usages and polluting industries. We had a chance to meet with the planning department on Friday to discuss this, and last night the Sustainability Commission met to discuss. We did vote at this time. We did not feel that there was enough time to change our position significantly from the letter. We did want to acknowledge that we felt positive that there was significant progress made in the changes proposed with the addendum, but that there were some additional changes that were needed to meet the full scope of what we had shared in our letter. First, in particular, the additional language around the business industrial as well as the waterfront zone. The word may needs to be changed to will or shall. We don't see any reason why the city should not commit to prohibiting future industrial uses that are deemed to be harmful to public health, quality of life, and the reduction of fossil fuel emission targets. That those are really important things that should happen regardless. And putting the word may in there leaves it open for changes in economic conditions. A second Trump presidency and the cancellation of offshore wind will change economic conditions that will make it very difficult to make progress in this area. So the city needs to commit to that very strongly. There's additional changes that we wanted to discuss around the other pieces. We appreciated the addition of cumulative impacts, but wanted the city again to commit to municipal policies around not just regulating, but reducing the cumulative impacts in those environmental justice areas. And would like to meet directly with the CPC around the future, the role that you all have as developers come to you with proposals, knowing how polluting industries will pitch their proposals in the language of green and resilient, even when they are far from that. So based on that, we ask for some of those additional changes to be made, changing the word may to will, and ask that you don't yet vote to approve this and send it to City Council until those changes are made and we can really dive into the process on that. The Camiro study that we did on the zoning ordinance and relationship to the climate justice plan took months to go through. And we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that the most important parts of the climate justice plan will be in alignment with the comprehensive plan, so that the zoning ordinance that follows and the other related work, like the port master plan process, will be able to be in alignment with the climate justice plan moving forward. And we look forward for that work to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Justin Baptista and Randall Rose is on deck.
All right, my name is Joseph Baptista, Providence residents. It is my opinion that the comprehensive plan as is needs to be sent back for revision due to the following issues in terms of housing. Weak passive language, big ideas with no measure of accountability, like a described mechanism for review. Lack of humanity for the people the plan represents, whose livelihoods would be affected by the new developments. If these issues are not corrected, it leaves the comprehensive plan largely open as a development lure for people outside the city without the proper regulation to keep it in check. Last I checked, the plan is supposed to ultimately serve, those within the city. Not neglect them to accommodate the needs of non-residents. In the last CPC meeting I attended, I said that moving forward, Providence requires a balance of the past and the future. Too much of either threatens a city's identity and those of its residents. The comprehensive plan requires the same delicate balance. For the sake of private residents above all else. Revising the plan for the reasons I mentioned maintains the balance. Anything less hurts the city of Providence more than it helps in the long run. It may not feel that way now, but if the plan moves forward as is without certain changes, give it a couple of years. You'll feel it then. It's why stopping that as much of that harm as we can now matters. Compromises, Chairman, the compromises that went into this plan are not nearly enough. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Randall Rose and then, oh, sorry about that. And Nina Markov is on deck.
You just.
Hello, members of the commission. My name is Randall Rose. I'm a member of the Kennedy Plaza Resilience Coalition and Rhode Island Transit Riders. I'm speaking only on one item on the plan, which is M1N, which, as you've been told, is controversial. It reads, support RIPTA in its process to establish a new world-class transit center that meets the needs of RIPTA operations, transit users, and Providence's planning and economic development goals. Just last month, the Providence City Council passed a resolution, which I gave to you, that's diametrically opposed to that line. And it's no coincidence that many people have been asking you to remove that from the plan. I'll just read the things that were highlighted in last month's City Council resolution, which passed the council unanimously, by the way. It says, Kennedy Plaza should be considered the default option for the hub and treated at least as equally as the other options being presented. And by the way, RIPTA's process for considering alternatives has never allowed riders or Providence residents to weigh in on the question of whether to stay in Kennedy Plaza or move. That's never been a question that's even asked in this process. Providence residents have not been able to speak up on that. And it says, in the resolution, RIPTA should not be working from an assumption that the city wants to have moved, but your plan says the opposite. It says, in the resolution, the opinions of transit riders are of utmost importance and should be central to the decision-making process regarding the future location of the central bus hub. You've received a letter from Rhode Island Transit Riders, which I belong to. We do not want this item in the plan. It prejudges the idea of moving the hub out of Kennedy Plaza. I actually am aware of two different surveys of bus riders on the issue of whether they want to keep the hub in the Kennedy Plaza or have it moved somewhere else. In both surveys, over 80% of bus riders want the hub to stay where it is, because Kennedy Plaza is the most central location. It's where most bus riders want to go. Most riders who go to Kennedy Plaza are not there to transfer. They actually want to go to central downtown. But if the hub is moved, they will have to change to a new bus and take an extra bus trip to get to their destination in central downtown. That's going to drive down transit ridership. It's going to drive down green transportation because the system becomes very hard to use. And the reason why Kennedy Plaza is the bus hub is because it's the best location for the state's main bus hub. It's where people want to go. It's the best example in the state of transit-oriented development because you want the hub to be near the locations people want to go. If you move the hub to some really remote location, that's transit-oriented de-development. So I urge people to contact your city councilor. If this line stays in the plan, it should be taken out of the plan. RIPTA feels they're under pressure. They feel they've been directed by the governor to move the hub somewhere out of Kennedy Plaza, anywhere, as long as they can move it out. That's not what, if you talk to some people in RIPTA, it's not as if they themselves are pushing for it. They just feel they've been ordered to do it. And it's not the best decision from a transit point of view because Kennedy Plaza is the ideal location. I've looked at the contract for this deal. It is not going to produce a world-class transit center as your draft plan describes it. It's designed to help a private developer profit, and maybe it's going to be a sort of decent transit center, but it's not going to be an improvement on Kennedy Plaza. So I urge you, just delete that line. It's a highly controversial matter. It should not be prejudged by your commission in opposition to the city council and the riders and the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Nina Markov, you are up, and Mel Rainsberger is next.
Hi, Nina Markov, President of the College Hill Neighborhood Association. I've submitted written comments to you guys and I hope you've read them. So I'm not going to take a long time up here.
We did.
But I just want to say that I'm still not quite reassured that that what you're about to unleash is not going to really negatively impact our the neighborhoods that work well and our historic fabric. I'd build where we're building, we're in areas where development can benefit. But I support the Providence Preservation Society stand about preserving what we have. Let's densify, but let's not demolish. And I'm a little concerned also about how developers, I know that we need developers and I know there are many good developers out there, but I've seen firsthand what happens when developers come into a neighborhood and they tear down perfectly good buildings, they jam students into homes, they build giant apartment buildings or want to build giant apartment buildings in neighborhoods with 3-story buildings. So I'm just really concerned that you're putting a lot of faith in developers to solve our problems. And it's not even clear that that affordable housing is going to be the result. At least it hasn't been yet. So I do really appreciate though how hard you've worked on this plan and how you do listen to all of us and try to incorporate everybody's views. So I thank you so much for that.
Thank you. All right, Mel Rainsberger and then Tyler Romero, you are up next.
Thanks so much. My name's Mel Rainsberger. I live over on the east side. My rent is $1,950 a month before any utilities. I have never owned a home in Providence, but I really thank you for the process that allows me to be a part of it. It is so hard to build a good process where a lot of people can participate and say their piece. And I want to encourage everybody here, not just the planning commission, but everybody here to think about what Providence looks like. I have lived here for 20 years. I am your neighbor. I have built this neighborhood as much as anybody else. And so when you're saying we don't want to change things, it's not so much changing it, it's making sure that people like me can stay. And what does Providence look like if everybody leaves except homeowners, except for people that can afford to not work? Because people that want to work are going to leave, and your restaurants are going to close down. Anything you want to do is going to close down, and that might work for you, but Providence will be dead. Any chance at good transit will be dead. And so think about what a future for Rhode Island looks like. We used to have more people here than we have now. We are built for people to live in. And so when you want a city that works, it needs people. And if we don't build it to have people in it, it's going to become a dead, decaying tooth that will no longer work for anybody. It will be solely a vacation home for people that can afford it. So really take that to heart, that I live here with you and I'm hoping to build a better Providence with all of you. I'm not trying to remove something from somebody else. I'm trying to make sure that it works for the most people possible and that it's pleasant and wonderful and takes us into the next century. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Tyler Romero and Patricia Raub is on deck.
Good evening. My name's Tyler Romero. I'm a member of the Providence Urbanist Network, or PUN. PUN is an organization that advocates for policies that would try to address the housing crisis that we're in. I want to first bring your attention to the fact that, as you said, this is a plan that is enacted every 10 years. So what that tells me is this has to be a forward-looking process. I think that this process has been generous in terms of the way that it tries to increase participatory actions among its residents. As you mentioned, dozens of workshops held throughout various centers in the community over the past couple of months that have drawn the attention of groups and individuals. It's a good thing that you've done that. And while I don't personally believe that this plan goes far enough to address our climate crisis and housing crisis, don't hear what I'm not saying. I thank you for the work that you do. I want to provide 3 specific actions that I am in favor of doing in this particular plan, which is to upzone areas so that multifamily buildings can be built by right, 2, to abolish parking minimums, and 3, to remove caps on units per zone. So I believe that by putting caps on units in specific zones is just contradictory to the goals you have of growing in the first place. I'd like to advise to not fall into the traps of other communities across our country. In prioritizing various environmental, aesthetic, historical, and character reviews, they can often be used as a means to halt the necessary growth of our communities by organizations that aren't acting in good faith and are in fact acting for their own financial self-interest. I've had the opportunity to work, I'll quickly round up here, had the opportunity to work in Providence, Central Falls, and I have lived in Providence and Newport, and I can tell you right now that units are over-occupied, meaning 6, 7, 8 people in what should normally be a 3. Density is here, whether we like it or not. We should make sure that it's available for all to be safely and affordable. Finally, and to finish up, Providence is for everyone. Yes, it's for the traditional nuclear family, but it's also for bachelors and bachelorettes, students, seniors, and renters, immigrants, service workers, and co-ops. Providence is for everyone, so let's make sure that we act like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Raub, you're up, and Lily Bogosian is on deck.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Am I
course.
speaking loud enough?
Yeah,
Bring the mic
make,
close to your mouth, please.
you can pull the microphone closer too. It's
Oh.
easier.
And thought of that. I am co-chair of RI Transit Riders. And we have also submitted statements with suggestions, which I believe you've gotten. The mobility plan, there's really a lot to like in it. And there are many ideas in there that we think are great and that we hope will be implemented. There are also a number of statements about things that you encourage the state to do. And when it comes to mobility, at least when it comes to buses, a lot of the decisions really are state controlled and not city controlled. So I'm going to talk only about the ones that the city has some responsibility over. One of them is the right on red, which we think is great. There are a number of dangerous intersections in the city, and they aren't all on Main Street or downtown. I live over in the west side of the city, and I've been almost hit by a car on many times crossing the street when I have the walk, and the car turns right towards me. The part that we would like to see perhaps strengthened is the part that has to do with sidewalks. The city has responsibility to keep sidewalks open for pedestrians, and bus riders, of which I am one, are also pedestrians, and there are students going to school on those sidewalks. And quite frequently, there'll be vehicles parked in the middle of the sidewalk so that you cannot get past them. There are there are sidewalks that are not shoveled when there is snow, even though there wasn't much last year. Or there are sidewalks that have been plowed and the driveways have been plowed right up to the corner of the person's property and creating snowbanks that people can't get over. Those are city responsibilities to enforce. And I'd like to see the wording on that a little stronger. Lastly, I also think that the statement about the multi-hub should be stricken from the plan. It is controversial, and I don't think that this plan really needs to get into that. What I do think is that the city has some responsibility to help with improving Kennedy Plaza. There was a time when there were events that took place regularly in Kennedy Plaza that were organized by the city, and I haven't seen much of that in quite a while. If the city had more activities going on there, it would be a safer place. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lily, you're up. Julissa Arce is Arce, sorry. Actually, I should know that. You've been in front of us many times. You're on deck.
I have a statement to submit to you in writing, which includes the can you hear me okay? Yeah. Which includes the signatures of 10 different Providence neighborhood associations, whom I've heard from in the past 24 hours. These 10 neighborhood associations agree that the present comprehensive draft does not specifically address some of the critical issues related to their, and I'll say our communities, because I'm with Fox Point Neighborhood Association and I'm one of those communities, one of those neighborhood associations. I'll submit this to you, but I want to just say a couple of things. And one is that the language in the plan seems to be lacking in specificity. It's repeating, I think, some of the same mistakes of the 2014 plan, which was often quoted by the CPC when categories like neighborhood character, community character were dismissed as undefinable. And we're seeing that again, which leaves the 24 plan open to unsympathetic interpretation. And I think it undermines the city's character. I think we could do better in terms of defining specifics on those things that have to do with character. Zoning in virtually every category favors construction in some neighborhoods where infrastructure is already severely stressed. I've talked about this before. I think you know specifically some of the areas I talk about in Fox Point, but it's also in other areas as well, where there just isn't the kind of infrastructure that would afford the kind of density that is being included in the plans. That is to say everywhere, just in some of these C zones where there's just not enough room on these streets for the buses and the especially the buses. They just don't offer transit. So I think zoning favors construction, and I would like to see some of these empty surface parking lots, which offer the least disruption of community life and can provide the housing that the city needs. We need to prioritize the sites where zoning is most desirable and prioritize those sites in the plan specifically. I think the draft plan is vague, both in the numbers of housing units. Tonight, we've heard 20,000. That's a new number to us. I don't know how many jobs we're going to get. I hope that we'll move up from being second to last in the country. Finally, I just want to say the Providence Preservation Society and the Sustainability Commission have written extensively about the concerns that our neighborhood associations share, and we recommend that these suggestions be enacted in the plan and that our neighborhood associations endorse the ideals and respectfully request that the CPC revise the comp plan to reflect our communities. And this might mean that the CPC has to spend a little bit more time on the plan. I know that's not popular, but it might be well worth the time over its 10-year life. We are available to help if you just call us. That's all I have to say, and I'm going to give you this list with the 10 organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Julissa. I saw you here earlier, maybe no longer.
Julissa.
Okay. All right, Cameron Lafreniere is up, and then Ian Saxene is on deck. Look at that, after like 12 of these meetings, I finally pronounced your name right?
Fantastic. Couldn't have been better. Appreciate all of your great work, everyone on the commission. I think you guys take a serious look at this. There's obviously a lot of competing interests. So I just thank you for really taking the time to hear everybody's input. So I think the one thing in the plan that I don't think anyone has really talked about is variable parking pricing. This is, if anyone knows, by Donald Troop. His fans are called Troopistas. Essentially, he makes the case, and many municipalities have actually gone through with this, that there is a high, very, very high cost of free parking. And also there's a very high cost of low cost parking. Our small businesses, as we know, the streets will need to change. We will need to have more bus only lanes to support the kind of transit that we need. We will have less parking spots. That is controversial, but it will eventually happen as it is required as our city grows. And San Francisco is the first to take into effect, essentially trying to get the parking rate down to 85%, essentially leaving one spot or two spots open. It allows more small businesses to thrive because spots turn over. This is something that I think the commission really needs to take into consideration, as again, we'll have 10 years, within the next 10 years, the transit master plan will hopefully be funded, as I have our Save Ripta insignia here. So I think the other great thing that we've discussed is the abolishing of parking minimums. Something that's important to consider is when we remove all these surface level parking lots, and we're in this sort of phase with mode shifting, we're going to have a situation where we're really going to need to maximize that space. And a great example of something that I think is really appalling is the Upper South Providence new construction right off of Broad Street. It's like 60% parking. This is a huge issue. It's right along the R line. I think it's abhorrent that, you know, we're allowing this sort of development to happen and then we're going to lock that in. I think the legalization of townhomes is really important. I really think that we need to start talking about expanding the TOD zone. I live in an R3 zone that is 7 units. It is my understanding that many lots are still not going to be within, they're going to be underzoned. And I think, I've said this before, I'll say it again, Wayland Square needs to be upzoned to its actual density, including the fact that half of Wayland Square is parking lots. We need to have strong incentives, including taxing landowners that keep surface level parking lots around, which is to the detriment of our community and will be one of the biggest fights in Providence in the next 10 years. So I really think it's important for us to consider this much more seriously. And lastly, I just want to say that and echo what Cedric has said. You know, we've seen what happened. This has happened in Boston, in the historically Black neighborhoods of Boston, in Dorchester. That community is unrecognizable. Do we really want to consider what will happen if we do not properly upzone neighborhoods along TOD corridors and expanding TOD corridors to include more affordable units for people that can't afford a car and will use transit and are the most likely people to use transit? We really need to consider the effects that this plan will have on permanent displacement. I've already talked with someone who has experienced this multiple times. South side of Providence, took the bus the past couple of weeks, couldn't be here tonight, but I want to advocate for him and just talk about that. That needs to be the biggest fear, that not that our historic character will be threatened. Let's be real. We already have 7% of the built environment nationally protected. Like this cannot be the biggest fear. But for people that already have and own a home, clearly, you know, affordable housing is not their biggest fear, but it is for everyone else. 60% of people in the Providence area who rent. Thank you very much. And I approve this plan.
Ian Saxene, you are up, and Sharon Steele, you are on deck.
My name's Ian Saxene. I live on 500 Wickenden. I want to thank the committee and the planners for all the time you've put in. It's been a model of transparency and hard work. And I ask that you don't be discouraged by voices who confuse a lack of deference for a lack of transparency. Those of us, we don't expect to get everything we want. That's not because of foul play or lack of transparency. It's because that's politics. This plan, I believe, is both the most sweeping zoning reform that the city has seen since the 50s, as you've said. And for that reason, I support it, even though I also believe it doesn't go far enough. And I hope that you rise to the situation we find ourselves in, our interrelated housing and environmental crises. Rhode Island is one of the oldest states in the country. The idea that there are not working people who want to come here and work is absolutely not true and ridiculous. And I would also urge us to think about the fact that there's a lot of people who want to stay in Providence and Rhode Island who struggle to, and there's a lot of people who want to move here that we would benefit from. And I think sometimes this sort of localism bordering on exclusionariness that I hear from some circles, it's quite honestly toxic. And I think that we should speak for the many people who want to live here, especially at this time when many American civil rights are dependent on where they live. And so if we're going to talk about our city's character, we have to build according to our values. And it saddens me to hear terms like fabric of our neighborhoods used to weave a net that excludes. In this country, your home is your castle, but that doesn't mean you get to build a moat around our city. I would encourage, on both for economic reasons and equity, that you strongly look at upzoning, especially Angel and Waterman Street on the east side. Neighborhoods that are working well have room for more people too, and I think we should welcome that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sharon Steele, you are up, and Claudia Wack, you are on deck.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thanks to the staff for all of the hard work. I'm going to start with something that is really quite easy with respect to the ask from the Jewelry District. And that is that we are still waiting for the map to be adjusted to have the Jewelry District represented as every other neighborhood is represented on the map. And we will not stop asking for that until it is done. There's something that Bob raised, and it has to do with the number of projects that have been approved and why so many haven't been built. And the answer to that is something that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's costs. Costs are so high right now, and the tax base is what it is. So if we want more affordable housing, there has to be a way to pay for it. And right now, there isn't a way to pay for it. And if we don't bring developers in and give them tax incentives, then those developers are not going to develop here, and those buildings are not going to they're not going to be built. So the cold hard reality is that we have an imbalance in revenue and what it is going to take to literally provide the affordable housing that we all know that we need. Carla pointed that out. Nina and Marissa have pointed out some things that speak to the comp plan being too long and specificity of language. And I would echo some of those things. With respect to turning apartment buildings into student housing, my question is, if they read like a dorm and they are a dorm, who's going to enforce what happens in those buildings? I'm just going to plow through a couple of things. If we're going to grow the population to $250,000, the question becomes, is the comp plan going to address the staff that the city needs? Because right now there is not enough staff to enforce basically anything, construction materials on sidewalks, stop work orders, because rules are not being literally adhered to. So there have to be something in terms of parts of the plan that begin to address how the administration and literally employees in certain departments are available in order to be able to handle this additional housing. Last but not least, where is my last page? With respect to parking, I know it's a dirty word, but the reality is that for people who we are trying to attract here, who have disposable income, and we need those people, they tend to be older, they need parking spaces. And the idea that we can legislate for someone who owns a surface parking lot, I know we would like for those to be developed, but unfortunately, we can't mandate that those things happen. So with that, I'll say thank you to all.
Excuse me, thank you. Claudia Wack, you're up. Liza Birkin, you are on deck.
Good evening. My name is Claudia Wack. I live at 22 Hart Street. Thank you to the planning staff and members of the commission for the hard work that you've done so far on this draft plan. I think there's a lot of things to love about it. Just to name a couple, ADUs, townhomes, reducing parking minimums. I think these things will go a long way towards
helping the city achieve its housing goals. But I would respectfully disagree that the plan does enough on housing. And because I know that I only have a short time here, I would just draw your attention to one thing in particular, which on page 9 of the draft land use chapter, the plan proposes a new density cap on multifamily housing in medium and high density zones like R3, RP, and R4. I think while this might be an okay incremental growth strategy in a zone like R3, where multifamily apartment buildings aren't currently allowed, it would represent a new restriction on multifamily housing in RP and R4, which I think would just be a really wrong-headed move at this moment in time, especially when there's a lot of gentle density strategies on the table that the city is not necessarily taking up either, like legalizing duplexes citywide. So I hope that I'm wrong about the adequacy of the plan because the need is so great, but I would urge you to be bold and go farther than what is currently here, and especially be clear that no new density cap for multifamily housing is going to apply in the RP or the R4 zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Liza Birkin and Grant Dolgarian, you are on deck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liza Birkin. I'm the lead organizer of the Providence Streets Coalition. I've attended a lot of these meetings on Zoom, but haven't been here, so it's nice to, I'm glad I'm with you all. I want to commend the commissioners and the city on a really well-developed plan. Like so many of the mobility advocates have said here tonight, we're really pleased with what's there now. I think there's a lot to like in the mobility chapter. I do want to echo Patricia Robb in the strong need for better city enforcement of sidewalk clearance, snow clearance, and parking on sidewalks. It plagues our city and is a serious accessibility issue. You will probably not be surprised at all to know that I am so thrilled to hear that parking minimum citywide, abolishing parking minimum citywide is on the table, as well as no right turn on red. Those are both top priorities for our organization, for our community members, for everyone who walks, bikes, and takes transit around the city. And if we are really trying to do that and are meaning and really mean what we say with those goals, those two things, abolishing parking minimum citywide and preventing and striking no turn on red citywide, are huge steps to get us there. I did not provide this for you, but I'm very, very, very happy to have my interns produce a list, including Cedric, thank you, Cedric, produce a list of the, I believe now 70 cities in the US that have abolished parking minimums. They range from the big ones like San Francisco, Anchorage, Alaska, to Hartford, Connecticut, and Bridgeport. There's some in New Hampshire, they're everywhere, Cambridge, Mass. This is very common. This is no longer radical. This is what cities are doing to increase housing production, responding to the need for more housing nationwide. So it's very, very normal, and Providence should do it. Same with right turn on red. More and more cities are doing that, responding to the national pedestrian safety crisis that we are also experiencing here in Providence. So there's so much more that I want to say, echoing the housing asks, echoing the need to rezone the port for community health. I'm a Southside resident. I was so excited to see the redesign of the public street waterfront access that the sustainability department has been working on for the past several years. And that project was supposed to be kind of getting our foot in the door to the waterfront on the south side and opening it up. And I don't feel like this plan goes far enough in changing the land use of the southern waterfront in our city. What else? Want to echo what Claudia said, everything about the gentle density and the really common sense changes that we can do, minimum lot size, allowing duplexes everywhere. And thank you. Can we just give it up for Councilman Sanchez for like, oh my God. displaying this leadership for in his community, and we need to see this citywide. It's not hard, it's not radical. This is what we need to do to respond to the housing crisis. So thank you.
Thank you. Grant Dolgarian, you are up. And Marissa Brown, you are on deck. After which we're going to take a short break. We've been here for a little while and we're going to continue calling people. after this, we're gonna take a break and then we'll call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well. All right, Lloyd, you're still not happy, Lloyd, so I'm gonna stand. Grant Bulgarian, 20 Exeter Street. I've been paying attention to land use and zoning in the city of Providence since before most of you guys have been born. And so, thank you. I just want to offer a couple of thoughts on process and then a couple of thoughts on specifics. Hopefully, after you allow everybody who wants to speak, once, first time around, you'll allow folks who want to have more to say, to come back. Because that's the way it used to be, up until recently. The, number one, as far as process is concerned, yes, the planning department went all over the place, neighborhood, all bunch of neighborhoods citywide. My suggestion, recommendation was the other way around. Have centrally located, but do it section by section, so the folks who want to have specific recommendations on each section can do that without running out of time. And so I still recommend that. Number two, if the department decides that it doesn't want to do that, then I highly encourage the City Planning Commission to do that. Having one public hearing at the end of the process on the entire plan, to me, is not really very user-friendly. I respect Joe Mulligan. He's a very talented, knowledgeable individual. I respect Bob Azar. He carries institutional knowledge with him. But I am not a fan of this plan. Number one, we have very small house lot sizes in Providence, 50 by 100, 5,000 square feet. That's pretty small. And that's if you're R1. If you're R2, you cut it in half. Density per dwelling unit, square foot per dwelling unit. If you're R3, you cut in thirds. R4, we used to cut in quarters. But oh no, last year, in a series of quote unquote technical amendments, we just decided to make R4 R5, 6, 7, 8. No, we made it R infinity. We said there's no square footage per dwelling unit in R4. To me, that's irresponsible. That's not planning in a very precise manner. That's just sledgehammering. So I'm very much opposed to that. As far as mobility is concerned, the city of Providence does nothing when it comes to RIPTA. Do they send any money to RIPTA? No. Most transit authorities throughout this, I'll take 30 more seconds. Most transit authorities nationwide have transit districts where the communities that are being served contribute money. RIPTA doesn't do that. I'm not suggesting that should happen, but what I am suggesting is a number of things that the city of Providence could do to make transit much more accommodating to the citizens, the residents of the city of Providence. And they're not doing it. I have specific recommendations. I don't have the time to talk about them. Last thing, you've heard folks talk about the idea of relocating Kennedy Plaza anywhere. It's a stupid idea if it was a free, if it didn't cost any money. It costs money, it makes it even more idiotic. All roads lead to Kennedy Plaza, don't move it. I've made a suggestion as to we can improve the traffic circulation around Kennedy Plaza, and I would like to see that in the plan. You could tell the DPW to do that tomorrow. Finally, this year, and only this year, not last year, not next year, but this year, we have an issue called the Washington Bridge. How much is the minimum that the Washington Bridge is proposed to cost to build? Minimum, I've heard, $250 million. And what will that accomplish? That will accomplish adding a fourth lane for a fraction of a mile. I suggest that the CPC tell Planning and Development tomorrow to issue RFPs for an environmental impact statement on that proposal. And what would that consist of? EISs typically look at do nothing. They look at the proposed action, which is to add a fourth lane or something else. And what's the something else that I'm suggesting? Rail. And not just rail across the Seekonk River from Providence to East Providence. I'm suggesting rail from Providence to Newport. If Boston had a Newport less than 3 dozen miles away, they'd be connected yesterday by rail. We should look at that, get the information, get the numbers, get the economic impact that would have. Most of the infrastructure is already there. Most of the right-of-way is already there. Let's get the information. I'm a firm believer that more information we have, better decisions we make.
let's do that now. We can't wait. Next year, the state will start spending the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Marissa Brown, and like I said, after Marissa, we're going to take a brief break so that we can stretch our legs, use the facilities, and then we will come back to public comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Marissa Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Providence Preservation Society, and I live in Providence in Fox Point. I also wanted to thank all the CPC commissioners, the planning staff, especially Tim Shea, who I know has spent so much time on this plan over the last 12 plus months. I wanted to also kind of say thank you to Bob Azar for the comments that you gave at the start of this meeting with regard to some of our comments to you about the plan, which were shared in a memo on June 9th to the commissioners and to planning staff, and then in a public statement. I also did want to say that in that memo and the statement that there's a lot that we see that we strongly support in this plan, including new sections for this plan that were not in 2014 that prioritize the preservation of modern architecture and historic places in underrepresented communities, a stronger focus on the redevelopment of surface parking lots, which I think has a lot of support in this room and everywhere in Providence, and other ideas about how to expand the work of preservation. What I wanted to say tonight is sort of to reiterate, going back to the beginning, I took a look at the expansion of the definition of historic districts that was shared, and I think I'm looking at the map that was in the updated appendix today. And I think what I was looking at was the 36 National Register properties that are being added to the historic district overlay. So my comments about that would be, I would push this plan a little bit further in that regard. I and PPS still feel that defining the historic districts for the purposes of the plan as the city's local historic districts is just not, it presents a real equity problem. I still strongly support the inclusion of the National Register historic districts, especially in the wards that don't have local historic districts, be included as historic districts in this plan. I also really strongly believe that some of the National Register individual landmarks that are not in wards that have historic districts be included. Of the 36 sites that I saw there, 3 look like they're actually one sort of building, one campus building. 2 of them have the same address. I think I'm wondering how you arrived at that list of 36. And I think it would be helpful for the public to understand how that list of 36 was put together. Additional language, we would still love to see stronger language with regard to adaptive reuse and other sustainable building practices, moving from words like consider to prioritize, should to must. Those were shared in some of the inline comments. Also, I think, we at PPS hosted 2 community conversations about the plan at the end of May and early June. One insight that came out of that meeting was just how infrequently the words equity and equitable are in this plan. The word equity appears 8 times in the last draft I looked at, and equitable 9 times. And if you compare that to Boston's plan, equity appeared 42 times and equitable appears 21 times. So I think to the language question, I think it's important in a plan like this that equity it's more than a word. I think it's sort of a vision, it's a commitment, it's a values issue. So we would really encourage those words and that language to be part of the guiding sort of North Star of this plan. We still believe they're in a design review committee, but we can take that up elsewhere. So thanks for letting me go beyond time.
Thank you. Okay, it is 6:48. So we'll break until 7 o'clock. We'll give us 12 minutes, take a little quick break, and then we'll come back at this again. to order. Before we pick up with the sign-in sheet, can everyone please, if you're having a conversation that needs to continue, just have it out in the hallway. And if you're still here, you're welcome to stay. Just remember to respect the new chairs. They are new chairs. That goes for all my fellow commissioners as well. We cannot spill food on these chairs tonight, for sure. It says the chair, yes. If you are joining us this evening, we're getting to towards the end of the physical body here, the sign-in sheet. So if you're joining us remotely and you'd like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. We'll go in the order that you do. You can do that by hitting the hand in the bottom middle portion, lower middle portion of your screen, or if you're calling in, you can press *9. And we'll get to you guys next as you raise your hand in order. And we will continue with the number 2 sign-in sheet. And the first person up is Chris Tompkins. And the second person up is Kate Shapira. Thank you.
Thank you, Commission. Just 3 key points. Let's talk about mobility, important factor of this report. So I have 2 questions. First question is, in April of 2018, Senator Reid procured a appropriation for the restoration of the College Hill Tunnel for $904,000. We're now in the summer of 2024. That's just being done. So the plan focuses upon transit mobility, and it took 6 years from the point that the appropriation was made by the federal government for RIPTA or state government or whoever to restore a critical infrastructure for the city. 6 years from the date of appropriation. And we're counting on mobility and transit to address the growth of the city. I have some concerns about that. My second question about mobility is most college students receive free RIPTA passes. And yet the city of Providence subsidizes on-street parking for college students at $200 a year. Does that make sense? Let's go to density and upzoning. Certainly a core focus of this plan. So as Deputy Director Azar noted, there's some high priority areas that for the past 10 years have not been developed. Why is that? I don't know. But why are pad ready sites with no zoning impediments and nothing's been developed for 10 years? I don't understand. I don't have the answers. I'm just raising the questions. My final point is one of the speakers referenced a Wall Street Journal article about the sharp rise in rents in the city of Providence. That's a fair comment. That should be concerning. On April 8th, 2024, there was another concerning article in the Wall Street Journal. We're out of 55 metropolitan areas, over 1 million in population. Providence was ranked 54th out of 55 in job creation. 54 out of 55. We beat Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm a believer of economic growth drives housing. But it seems to be that most people are focused upon housing instead of economic development. Now, maybe there are a lot of 1099 workers that are just choosing to live here, and that's great. But when you're 54 out of 55, somebody needs to laser focus in on that issue if we're going to move the city forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, you are up, and Christian Roseland, you are on deck.
Thank you to the planners for all your work. I am gonna read something. I want this plan to commit to housing in sufficient quantity at all price points and methods to keep those price points constant across income levels and commensurate with what people who live and work in Providence are earning. People need to be able to move in to their houses. They also need to know that they're going to be able to afford to stay. Stability of work for adults, stability of schooling for kids, stability of relationships and care networks for families and elders. All of this contributes to the stability of the economy and of social living, and it depends on the stability of housing. Keeping housing within reach for Providence residents helps people avoid homelessness. It reduces commuter traffic, it reduces air pollution, and it also allows the city to accommodate people who arrive from elsewhere for opportunity and out of necessity with minimal disruption. As someone who has housed people who are having a lot of trouble and distress, I'm also speaking up for supportive housing for people with disabilities and mental illness, which I've seen in this plan. Public restrooms in our parks and public areas, which I have not seen in this plan, but would like to, and increased adequate and clean short-term shelter, which I have seen. These are questions of dignity as well as of public health, sanitation, and survival. If you had to be outside at all today, you know that our city is changing whether we like it or not. Our historic fabric needs some serious alterations if it's going to keep us covered during the next 10 years. And some of the elements of this plan might provide those changes if we commit to them. Mel said earlier, I live here with you. Let's make this a city for everyone who lives here now, not just white people, not just wealthy people, not just healthy people, not just people in their prime. Everybody has to be somewhere. Let's make this a city where people can live. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Roseland, you're up, and Daniel Morris, you are on deck.
Thank you, members of the City Plan Commission, for all your work on this plan. It's interesting to see you here yet again, another late night for you. This has been a long process, and I think there's a lot of good things in the current draft plan. I'm particularly fond of the upzoning from R2 to R3, the language around the disincentivizing of surface parking lots and the removal of parking minimums. You know, there's a number of other things that I could speak in favor of. However, I also feel that strongly feel that there are some missing opportunities. We have an uneven application of density in the zoning map that was put forward with this plan, including in neighborhoods that have ample access to transit. This is an equity issue. When density is forced onto low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, but wealthy white neighborhoods do not share in that, like Summit, where some of us live, then we end up with an equity problem and we end up with people resenting density. But more specifically, the goals in this plan are undermined by specific language. It's problematic that we have a limit on 3-story buildings in medium density zones, but that's relatively minor, as well as the limit on 4 stories in high density zones. I don't know how we're supposed to build ample housing with when we continue to add new limits. But what's most problematic in this plan is a very recent language addition, the density cap, which is proposed on page 9 of the land use chapter. This is entirely at odds with the stated goal of removing barriers to building housing. So on one hand, this plan proposes to build a lot of new housing. On the other hand, it introduces multiple new barriers to doing exactly that. I call upon you to remove this recent language addition regarding the density cap. It is wholly at odds with the goals of building more housing, because we are in a housing crisis. Rents have skyrocketed in the past few years. They are becoming unaffordable even for medium wage earners. I have my friends who work in the state are having to move to Cranston. They're having to move out of the city. This says nothing for working class and poor people. In particular, it's a danger to our arts community. Art, music, and theater need artists, musicians, and actors. Those are not high-paying jobs. They need affordable housing. We need to actually do what this plan purports to do and remove barriers to building housing so that we can do that. If not, we are in danger of losing our creative class, fundamentally undermining our city, and making the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, and the homelessness crisis all worse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Daniel Morris, you are up, and Will Meredith, you are on deck. Again, if you're joining us from home and you'd like to speak, comment about the plan, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in.
Hello, good evening. My name is Daniel Morris. I live in the Summit neighborhood off of Hope Street. Want to begin by mentioning that earlier somebody brought up issues of Providence's tax base not being high enough to support new residents. The best way to increase your tax base is to get new residents. With that said, one of the issues New England as a region has because of the housing crisis in part is age. This is the oldest region in the country by median age. I believe the median age in Rhode Island is about 40. Other neighboring New England states are about the same. And family formation in our states is not high. We have a future crisis with not having enough children who will grow up to be adults to fulfill our workforce needs. When it comes to housing, we often talk about the economic reality, cost of a home, cost of rent, cost of utilities, but there's a social aspect as well. If rents, cost of homes, et cetera, are too high, people will not have families. And then those children who should be being born but aren't will not grow up to be workers. And earlier we've talked about, making sure that our local small business community is staffed enough to function. At the same time, with R2 to R3, I live in a triple decker. I've lived in 2 within the city. And there's a strong, not just economic benefit to that, because my rent is lower by the fact I live in a triple decker because it's split among more residents. There's also a social benefit to it. I know more people. I know my neighbors. If the city was, let's say, like a suburban town, it's just all R1, the possibility of communal connection is lower. I grew up in a suburban town where that was the case, where there's no double deckers, no triple deckers, just single family only. And it's harder to get to know your neighbors. You're more distant from them. People tend to stay on their property. But when you live in a triple decker, a double decker, or larger apartment buildings, you tend to have easier access to others. One of the things that makes Providence great is that because we're such a small city, those chances of communal connection are higher, unlike say New York City, Boston, etc. So when it comes to upzoning, we're not just talking about cost financially, driving down rents, driving down the price of homes. We're also talking about families. We're also talking about community. We're also talking about neighbors. If we do not increase the production of our 3s, our 4s, etc., we make those chances lower. Providence really needs to consider its future when it comes to family formation, because we will not have a workforce if things continue as is. And at the same time, our schools will not have students. Thank you very much. I recognize this committee has done a lot of work on this draft. I think a lot of us in this room really appreciate that effort. I know one of the things you did that was very helpful was in previous meetings, you'd have CPC plus other items. You've separated that. I think a lot of us are grateful for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Will Meredith? And then we will move on to the online, and we'll come back to see if we missed anyone both here and online afterwards.
Hello, good evening. I'm a newcomer to Providence, a resident of Providence. This is my first public meeting here, and the first time speaking at a public meeting here also. And I just came to check it out and look into the eyes of some of my neighbors here and the commission. And I appreciate your work, and I appreciate most of the opinions that I've heard here. And I would echo a lot of them, but I'm not going to use my time to do that. I just have a few minor things that I had paid attention to in the context of being both a municipal employee and like a public works employee and a public transit employee. One of the things I noticed in the building section with respect to demolition, I think it could be interesting to have reference to deconstruction and material preservation. I don't see that in the plan. Doesn't mean it wasn't talked about. I'm, again, kind of Johnny come lately here, and I haven't spent that much time with this plan. So I would echo advocating for really trying to avoid demolition. But I think it could be interesting to include some material that advocates for reuse of these materials instead of just throwing it out. Another small issue that I noticed here is that the only reference to like infiltration and stormwater is with respect to the parks. And I don't think that the parks should be the only place where we think about that or draw a reference to it. And as a former resident of Europe, I saw a lot of permeable pavement. This could be interesting for our roadways and or parking lot kind of situations. I'm a big advocate of roundabouts as well. I don't see any type of roundabout language in here, nor in the Greater Rhode Island transportation plans. Doesn't mean, again, that no one's thinking about it or talking about it. Unfamiliar, kind of Johnny come lately, but just as a former resident of places where there were a ton of roundabouts, I think this would mitigate a lot of the issues in our what I like to call traffic sewers around here. So that, I think, concludes my comments for tonight. Thanks again all for being here and being engaged in a very civil way.
Thank you. Hope this isn't your last time. All right, so we're gonna move right on to the online, and then we'll come back and we'll see if anyone else from the physical room here wants to speak that we missed already, and we'll make sure that we get everyone online as well. Again, if you're joining us online, raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in.
Okay, first is Dylan Conley. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, everyone.
A nice little plug right there. I like it.
I appreciate everyone coming together. I appreciate everyone's work. I'll try to be very quick. I think generally some of the efforts at up zones, specifically to R3, have been hampered by the General Assembly not passing the building code reform. I think that's a very large obstacle to seeing any increased density underneath the current comp plan. I would suggest that a easy solution for that would be to have lot lines for townhomes be basically 0 lot lines, so that each townhome can be its own single family home as opposed to a condo. It's a pretty big deal for financing, increases the opportunities for purchasing. The other thing I would note is the C1 to C2, which is, I think, generally being referred to as an up zone. When you actually look at what that means in terms of housing, it's a down zone. It's an increase in setbacks, which restricts the size of the footprint. I think I really appreciated Bob's discussion about the different headwinds associated with housing and projects actually getting built. I want to drill down on one of those points. It's that, you can't make any more land. That's a partial truth. This board makes recommendations to the council on how can be built per piece of land. So while we can't grow of land in the city of Providence, we can grow the square footage of buildable area in the city of Providence. So I think that's a very important note. I just got a note that I was unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well,
yes, we can.
Just my internet. But the last thing I want to specifically identify is there is a proposed down zone from I2 to C2, which specifically targets an existing housing project that would reduce the height of that project by approximately 3 stories. And it's disappointing to see a targeted down zone of a housing project.
Do you want to wrap up your comments quickly?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, it looks like Go Mall's iPad. Could you identify your full name, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. It's Paula Donovan and I live in the Elmwood neighborhood. I submitted some written documentation, which I think you all got in advance of this meeting, but I just wanted to speak to two of the points. And this is feedback on the land use section. And with respect to the combination of combining C1 and C2 zones, it's unclear to me what will be the definition or the description for this, I guess, new zone, but I would request that it follow the definition for neighborhood commercial district that accommodates areas of small to medium scale commercial use, rather than using the definition for the C2 zone. The other thing I wanted to speak to is the under objective land use 7, the spot zoning, non-conforming uses, and consistency with the comprehensive plan. That there's a statement in the 4th paragraph that says these deviations from zoning often do not have a negative effect on surrounding property. And I just want to say that that's not been my experience. And the pictures that I submitted with my written documentation are an example of how the expansion of the commercial non-conforming businesses into the residential area have had a negative impact on my street. And that particular intersection is the intersection of Broad, Lenox, and Thurbers Avenue. That's a rather dangerous intersection because of the way Thurbers and Lenox come into Broad. It's a major pedestrian area because of the bus stops that are there, but also because a lot of students from my neighborhood cross Broad Street to get to Roger Williams Middle School, the Juanita Sanchez High School, and the 360 High School. And these businesses are parking on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk. They've got their dumpsters on the sidewalk. And I believe, it is my opinion, that the commercial zones, especially on the south side, should no longer be extended into the residential areas until these substandard operations are addressed. Thank you. And thank you everyone for all your hard work, and everybody in the audience for your comments.
Thank you. What else do we have?
Okay, that's it for the online.
Okay, is there anyone else here in the audience who hasn't had a chance to speak yet that wishes to? Doug, okay. Is there anyone else? If so, please take these 2 or 3 new seats that are beautifully positioned here. They're wonderful seats, aren't they?
Thank you, everybody. A lot of work has gone into this plan for sure. My name is Doug Victor. I live in the Elmwood neighborhood. I'll be living there for 40 years on Friday. So anyways, it's one of my anniversaries. I moved to the neighborhood because I wanted to live in a very diverse setting, and I wanted to live in a city, and my sights got set on Providence. And I stumbled upon the Elmwood neighborhood and the Elmwood Foundation for Historic Preservation, which was kind of functioning as a CDC at that time. And their philosophy was that this was a neighborhood that welcomed everybody, regardless of difference, including economic difference. And this is the neighborhood that I've lived in for 40 years. And this is the kind of city I'd like to live in. I think there are lessons to be abstracted from, from that mission in terms of thinking about the whole city, thinking about how the city, what parts of the city are bearing the brunt of more affordable housing instead of having it be more equally shared across all the neighborhoods in the city. I think the plan needs to address that. I also think that perhaps it was a mistake to banner out the word density. And I know that there's been a lot of attempts to define that, but I think that word has been kind of a real trigger. I would like to also say that we have a housing need, but I want to defer to some of the previous speakers who spoke to, we have a need for jobs, we have a need for people to have stronger economies. And there needs to be a way that it's not just about density, it's not just about building houses, but it's making sure that underneath all of that, that is what's driving it. The economy is driving it as it needs to happen. So we need to address the housing crisis. Absolutely. It needs to be shared with every neighborhood across the city. I don't see any part in the plan where it speaks to that. And I would say that with the internal review of the planning department for new housing, I hear that there are professionals in there, but what I don't see that there's no room for community voice in that process. And I would say that community voice needs to be included in that process. So thank you for your work, and that's it for me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that hasn't had a chance to speak yet? That wishes to speak on the comprehensive plan? Anyone joining us online? Again, raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. And seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item.
You're not gonna let people come back? Why not?
So
That used to be the case.
okay, so we are at the point where we have heard the introduction, the public comments, and do you want to read the staff report, and then we'll move into the first items that we have to deal with this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the commission. So in our staff report, we just kind of lay out the process. I'm not gonna read through that. I want to say that from a procedural standpoint, we are going to ask you to take a vote on this plan, so that it can move on to the city council. You have, before you take a vote, you have the ability to make any changes that you want to make. But that has to be based on information you received in the course of the hearing. Once it's approved, it gets moved on to the city council. They have to hold at least one public hearing on this. And then they have to take a vote of the full council twice, because it's an ordinance and it has to be, comprehensive plans have to be incorporated into our code of ordinances. So we'll ask for a vote on the entire plan, but before then, I think it would be appropriate to take a separate vote on Councilman Sanchez's request. This is, there's two parts to it. One is to adjust the future land use map as we're showing in the plan. In the sixth ward, it would be a change in the land use designation from low to medium density residential. And the second part is that there's corresponding zoning for those parcels. And that would be from R1 to R3. So that would be the first thing. Next, we recommend that you should vote to find the comprehensive plan in conformance with the content requirements outlined in Rhode Island general law, and further that you advise the council to approve the plan. There's one thing that I would request that we didn't include that occurred to me relatively recently. And that would be a zoning change for a parcel at 250 Dyer. This is a parcel that the city council rezoned several years ago to allow for a 600-foot tower. Since that project is no longer under consideration, and since this is in the I-195 land, since the I-195 Commission has already adjusted their regulations, I think that you should adjust the comprehensive plan, not the future land use map, because that just calls this area downtown, but the proposed zoning change map should be adjusted such that that lot goes from D1 600 back down to what it was, which is D1 100. As a practical matter, the I-195 Commission still has control over this. They still have zoning control over it, but I think it's important that in our plan and on our zoning map, it's identified as such. And I would just like to just take a moment to say how appreciative I am of the staff that have worked diligently on this. You know, the several people within the planning department have had a hand in this. Tim Shea obviously has been here from the beginning, and has just worked incredibly hard on this. So I want to call him out specifically and thank him. Yeah, and I'm happy to applaud that one. All the department heads and their staff who have contributed to this plan, I want to acknowledge and thank them. I want to thank the administration for its support of this effort. This is the third time I've been through a comprehensive planning process, and I want to say that I think I can confidently say that Mayor Smiley has been the only mayor that I've worked with on a comprehensive plan who has read every word of the document and has dug in deep and has commented. And in every case, the comments have been helpful and pragmatic, and he has been willing to engage in a lot of dialogue with us about our recommendations, and it has been a very fruitful dialogue. So right up to the top of this administration, I think we've gotten an incredible amount of support. So I want to acknowledge that. And finally, I want to thank you, commission members, month in, month out, while we're trying to do all of the regular business of this commission. We burden you with this, and this is a big deal. It's a lot for you to sit here for hours at a time, and you all have been incredibly thoughtful and helpful to us during this process. And so with that, I want to ask for your support. I hope that this can be a unanimous vote to send this on to the commission. And I hope that you can feel as proud of this plan as I am.
Send this on to the council.
I'm sorry, onto the council.
Thank you, Bob. I think maybe first, even before we start parsing and discussing other incorporations into the plan, because I have a few noted out. I think we should take up the item one, which is the CPC vote to approve the future land use map and the zoning changes for the parcels in the Mann neighborhood. I don't think there's much controversy around that. I think we can do that, then we can continue our discussion on the rest of the plan. So if everyone's so moved, okay, we have a second?
Second.
All right, let's take a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck, Councilman. All right. Now we'll get into the meat of it where there's more discussion to be still had. I already have drafted additional recommendations, and it's probably fitting that Councilwoman Anthony is here because she's probably going to glare at me at some of this. I also support this plan as drafted with a few additional recommendations to incorporate at the city council level. I want to pass this on. I want to make it obvious that I do want to pass this out of City Plan Commission and move it to the city council, where it will continue to iterate and the political process of this will continue to unfold. Move from the planning stage to the political stage. And so my recommendation would be that we vote to approve the comprehensive plan, that it conforms to the content requirements outlined in RIGL 45-22.2-6 and advise the council to approve the plan with the following additional recommendations to incorporate at the city council level. And that would be additional zoning changes. And they're very specific zoning changes. So this would be to the future land use map and the zoning recommendations. One is in relationship to a section from North Main Street to Camp and from Rochambeau to Edge Hill, and also North Main Street to Highland Ave and from 3rd Street to 7th Street. And that recommendation would be to approve to change that from low density to medium density, and to change from R1 to R3. Additionally,
Did you talk to the Summit Neighborhood
I
Association about this?
would recommend that the city council also incorporates all of the recommendations in the Zoe Mueller comments dated May 25th, 2024. These were presented at the last meeting we had. They discuss Wayland and Blackstone Boulevard changes to the future land use map and the zoning designations to specific areas that are already more dense than single family from R1 to R3. That's the one I thought that.
I'm gonna ask Tim, if, could you open up the zoning mapper and share that?
I also support this will finish up the zoning changes, which are the Fane parcel. I support the rezoning of that from D1 600 to D1 100.
So I just I would like Tim to illustrate to you those two areas that the chair spoke to. Maybe first the Ward 3. Just zoom in a little bit more and pan. Okay, and if you could just show us. Yeah, so show us where just to the left of your cursor, that's Highland Avenue and then Camp Street. And it would be the R1 between North Main and that area right there. Okay, right there and right there. Okay, so that's that one. And then Tim, can you zoom down to show the area there? I think, Mr. Chair, that this is a little less defined.
Yes.
And you know, this might be something where we can do a little bit more study on this prior to it going to the city council.
I would like that.
Where we can identify all of the parcels that are, that have more than one unit in them that might justify a zoning change.
Yeah, I think there are little pockets that are very specifically already more dense than single family and some commercial uses. And I think those areas could warrant the appropriate zoning. And if we're really, as discussed, we're really looking at moving the needle, we need to look at the other areas of the city as well as the areas that are already seeing more growth.
If I might add, this does not come out of the blue. This is not, these have both been identified in comments that have come into this commission and been publicly vetted. And importantly, they both are very close to areas that are major commercial corridors that are well served by public transportation. The parcels in the Summit neighborhood are less than a quarter of a mile from North Main Street, and the parcels in the other area are just to the north of Wayland Square.
And I think I specifically referenced Zoe Muller's comments at the last meeting and implored everyone to look into them a little bit further, because the more I'm an urban runner, so I like to run these streets, and I've been running down every street that she mentions here over the past 4 weeks, and I continue to feel more impassioned that they should be a higher density, because they already are seeing more density than low density residential. My final comment to incorporate, aside from everything that's already here, is Sarah Inglis's comments in totality regarding RIPTA and the mobility edits that she suggested. I see no reason not to incorporate those changes and edits into the plan at the city council level. Again, if any of these require further investigation or opining from the planning staff to the city council, I support that as well.
And if anybody wants me to read that language, she emailed it to me earlier today. I'm happy to read that if you want a refresher, or if you feel like you.
That was she read.
Yes.
Yes.
Read here.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So that's my suggestion. I've been jotting notes during this entire meeting about what I was thinking, and I had some thoughts prior to this meeting, obviously, because we've been doing this for a while and we've been hearing the public comment, and all of these good ideas have been coming forward. Commissioners? Noel, what are you?
I have a bunch of notes too, but some thoughts on things that were talked about tonight. There was some comment about improving design standards. Seems like it's come up a lot, design commission or whatever. But there was 2 agencies, the WBNA, which I'm a part of, and the Preservation Society, which were mentioned. I think you mentioned them, Bob, earlier, about them serving as kind of a design review, the WBNA for projects that happen in that neighborhood. But I was wondering if there was a way, well, I think most projects are required to go to the public, right? For review at some point. A lot of the people who have come through the meetings, we've asked them to go to public meetings or to hold public meetings.
Yes, so as part of the application procedure, we request, and the overwhelming majority of developers agree to do this. They contacted the elected officials, and they contact neighborhood organizations that are active in the areas where the projects are.
And do we ask them to open it up for comment on the design?
Well, we ask them to present to the organizations, and we don't specifically say, we'd like you, to, you know, submit your plan for comments regarding the design. Some neighborhood organizations engage in that, and some don't.
So I was wondering, well, about that, because we heard about it over the process of the whole, well, the last year. If there was a way that we could encourage that to be a part of, I don't know how, but like a part of the neighborhood associations, that would be part of their work, but I know at WBNA, we've done it for a long time. And we did it way back 30 years ago, but I'm not sure how it grew into being that and where we had a voice to say something to speak to the people who wanted to develop. I just don't know if there's a way to put this idea into the plan. Because it seems like that's a lot of the feedback we get in the meetings, right, is because people have comments about the design. But it's really late by the time it gets here. It's really late in the term of, you know, the building is probably already way beyond the design stage and over drawing for permitting.
We've been given more authority recently, and the changes that we approved that were approved at the end of the year, December of 2023. We explicitly state that the City Plan Commission has authority over design in certain circumstances where we never had that authority. We believed we did, and we treaded lightly because it wasn't explicitly stated, whereas now it is. So we do have the ability to manage design on projects that come before us that are asking for something.
Yeah.
So if you're asking for something, we have the authority to say, we don't like that, and we don't like that, and it's expressly written in our regulations. Right.
It is, and in fact, even when they're not asking for something special,
right,
you do have that under your authority when you make findings of consistency with, or that there's no adverse impact on the built environment.
And there is a staff member who's been reviewing administratively design, and you know, the thing about administrative approval is that the goal is to take away the red tape, to encourage development. But if at any point Bob's uncomfortable, or Jason, whoever's reviewing the design is uncomfortable, they send it to us because they have that authority. So you know what? I don't think we can make a decision on this. We're going to make you go to a public hearing. And that's a really good carrot and stick to hold out in front of a developer. Well, we could approve this administratively if you change A, B, and C, or you're gonna have to go to City Plan Commission because we can't approve this administratively.
So there was one idea. I just wanted to bring that up and see if we could include a little bit better component for the design review without establishing a commission for it. I was not really of that. But I had some other things too to think about. ADUs are a new thing, but are they gonna be allowed in new construction? Because you mentioned ADUs on the R1 zone.
Yeah, so the state law that just got passed it doesn't distinguish between existing or new construction. You can build in any zone an ADU by right, either new construction or existing.
Oh, that affects setbacks and all that.
So the way the law is written is that the city can't require any additional regulations with respect to ADUs around setback or lot area or anything like that. And so there are two possibilities for an ADU. It can go inside of the principal building, and be another unit within the principal building that houses the primary unit or units. Or it can go in, an accessory structure. If it's an existing accessory structure, like a garage, it can go there. And so we're gonna have to write regulations that say that it can go there. If it's a new accessory structure that's gonna be a dwelling, there will be setbacks that are different from garages that are often set directly on the property lines. But if it's so you won't be able to build, this is how we think we're gonna write these regs. We haven't written them yet. But my feeling is that if it's a brand new, say a tiny house or something in a backyard, it'll have to have certain setbacks, the same as other accessory structures. But if it's in a garage, like the one you worked on, you can't pick the garage up and move it. It can go in that, understanding that there might be some building code issues if you have existing windows on lot lines.
Yeah. Okay. Another question that came up there on minimum lot sizes. There used to, well, some of the lots were merged.
Yes.
And so, well, I just ran into somebody who said, look, there used to be a house here before, but now it's part of my parking.
Yes.
Can I build there?
I'd like to address that directly. While we would not support reducing minimum lot sizes in residential zones, the situation you talk about is something that we've thought about. In an area, say, where, every lot on the street is 3,200 square feet, except for a couple that are 6,400. Somebody at some point bought two lots and merged them. Either because that person realized that under the zoning at the time, those two lots couldn't be developed together. But now, since we've eliminated the merger provision, they can be developed together. And we don't want to punish the person who merged the lots. So that would be the exception. We didn't propose any change in the comprehensive plan because there's enough language in the comprehensive plan that allows us to evaluate lot sizes and so forth. But absolutely, what we want to say in zoning is that if you can demonstrate that your lots had been merged in the past, they can be unmerged.
And will it affect minimum lot size? You know how we have 3,000 square foot minimum for a single family, I think.
We don't have that anymore. No, that went away.
State law changes.
Okay.
Last year.
Yeah.
And your setbacks are pro rata according to the size, like say it's 5,000 versus 3,000, then it's all.
The setbacks shrink
proportionally
as the lot gets smaller.
And that's directly from state law.
Right. So say there's a lot of 6,500 square feet, could that be split?
If you can demonstrate that it was resulting from a merger at some point in history.
But if not, then it would create two undersized lots.
That's right. And
it wouldn't be allowed.
It wouldn't be allowed. We're concerned about that. About, like I said earlier, between eliminating merger provision and the new state law that allows you to build what the zone allows regardless of lot size, that's opened up thousands of lots for development. My main concern about shrinking lot sizes such that people can now subdivide and get smaller lots, I think that's going to result in a lot of demolition. And I think that's
to make smaller
lots for new houses.
So do we still have a minimum lot size for any?
We do, and 5,000 square feet in R1 and R3, and 3,500 square feet in R4. We don't have minimum lot sizes in commercial or industrial or waterfront zones.
One other question came up, about abolishing parking minimums. What about the on-street parking? Is that totally unrelated?
No, I think it's absolutely related. We do talk about eliminating parking minimums in the plan. I think it's in the language of the plan. And at the same time, we encourage the expansion and greater utilization of on-street parking, overnight on-street parking.
By permit still.
By permit still.
And those were my questions.
Will? Let's see, overall, I think the plan is, incredibly responsible. I think we're heading in the right direction, as far as creating the housing supply that the city desperately needs. I think without going overboard. The conservative look, which I think is really in the right direction here. My one question came up is actually when Dylan Conley mentioned, row houses and 0 setbacks. And I thought that was a practical comment. Are we gonna approve a lot of these items and then they get held up with the building department, and are not practically possible?
Well, it's a multi-phase.
I think, so I think what Dylan was talking about was that, unfortunately, because this law didn't get changed, the building code didn't get changed at the state level. What that effectively means is the upzoning that we're doing to R3. It will still be difficult to build triple deckers, meaning 3 units stacked on top of each other, because that will require sprinklers. The hope was that 3 families and maybe even 4 families would be put into the residential code such that those sprinklers would not be required. But that seems to be, based on everything I hear, the difference between a 3-family penciling and not penciling. So an alternative to stacking 3 apartments on top of each other is to stack them horizontally. And that's what we call a row house. Row houses, if they have fire protection, vertical fire protection between the horizontal units, they don't need sprinklers. So what he is suggesting is that if you allow for row houses, that you should allow for lot lines to penetrate down those fire protected walls such that they could be sold individually. And you'd avoid going to the trouble of having to create a condominium. That's not a bad. Huh?
Couldn't you just condominium that to get?
You could, but I think he's suggesting that fee ownership of the lot and the house is preferable. So I would not be opposed if you wanted to incorporate language that says something like allow for 0 lot line and small lots for row house development, and then we figure that out.
Just a point, in the building code, that is considered single family attached.
Yeah.
That is how it is properly defined. That is in the code. If you see a product like that in Baltimore and Philly, and we call it a row house, but by code, it's a single family attached.
Yep.
The lot line is, essentially on the cement wall, that runs the lot line. It's in DC, Mid-Atlantic, very common.
Yeah. Even in Boston.
Even in Boston. I think that's, I would support that type of language.
I just added that
makes
onto my
a lot of sense.
recommendations.
But the language I would recommend we get used to using is single family attached.
Okay, we can.
For single family attached development.
Yep.
Correct. That's how it is defined in the code.
Single family attached. parentheses, row house.
As it is commonly known.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's often a difference between how we say things in zoning and how
Well,
the building code.
I don't know how many times I heard the words granny flats used when discussing ADUs at the state level, so again, know your audience. That was it, Will?
Yeah, that was it. No more
That's a good
comments from
suggestion.
me, yeah.
I'm willing to include that in my recommendations. Dave?
I only have a couple of quick comments. One, if you'll indulge me for just a minute. My first comprehensive plan was 30 years ago in the town of North Kingstown. I was a college student. My best friend's father was on the town council. I'm from North Kingstown. So why that's important is because the way comprehensive plans used to be done, where a few people sat in a room and out popped the binder at some future point, and everybody said, what's a comprehensive plan? And then you explain it to them and they said, why should we care? Okay, that's how it used to be back in the day. So why I bring that up is because I'm very impressed by the amount of outreach and engagement both the staff and our council members have done in the past year or two. You can't hardly talk to some folks in the town, the city, our elected leadership, without having a conversation that gets back to the comprehensive plan and the future direction and growth in the city. So it's very encouraging to see the amount of engagement and outreach and the amount of commitment on behalf of the staff and our elected officials towards the future of Providence. It's actually fairly motivating. So with that being said, also, plan's not perfect, but it's really good. And I hope that the desire to be perfect doesn't knock out the really good. And that's the way I kind of see it. So those are my comments in addition to row houses and ADUs.
Thank you.
And one last piece that the
Granny flats, you mean?
the multifamily bill did pass the House 69-0 and was supported in the Senate. It got caught up in a couple of pieces of minutia regarding when it would be applicable in relation to the 2024 code that would be coming online later next year. So some of the folks at DBR and the legal department caused a little bit of stress at the end, but I have been told and assured that there's no one that did not support the bill. It just got caught up in a little bit of things at the end of the session. So there's every possibility next year that'll happen.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'd say the chances are high because no one is opposed to upzoning.
It's good. I mean, and it's a common sense bill. I mean,
well, that doesn't mean anything in Smithville. but,
You're
you
absolutely
know,
right. I should, as
Still a
soon
good
as
bill.
I said it, I regretted it. Yes. Miguel?
I have a couple of comments. My first question is in regards to the map changes that, or the zoning changes we were talking about in the Camp Street to North Main area and some, that should be held separate like we did the other. So are we gonna talk about that after doing this, or are you gonna? are we doing it
I'm
together?
proposing to incorporate all of this in our comprehensive plan approval that we send to the city council.
Well,
As recommendations for
okay.
them to incorporate, and they can take that up or not.
Okay, so one reason I'm bringing this up is that I don't know, for me, if I would want to put together, and the reason is I was kind of surprised when it came up. It didn't come up earlier, and unlike the previous
It
one
was
where
a previous
we had
meeting that it came up, not today.
right, was it, okay, so you got it, okay. So that was. that was
All
the
of
last
these
meeting?
are based on public comment that we've received throughout this process, so none of these are new.
Stand correct on that one, thank you. Otherwise, I was gonna say, I'm fully in support of that. I used to live on the Mount Hope area, and I think that the zoning would be appropriate, so if it did come up, my concern was more of community involvement, then that's.
Every
that's
one of these
fixed and correct.
recommendations that I have been from public comment that has come throughout this process.
Perfect, thank you. Was already brought up, but the row house, being single family attached, I think is a great option during the fallout with the real estate bubble. There was a huge issue, especially in Rhode Island, where people couldn't refinance, they couldn't sell the properties because they were condos and they did not meet the standards for a lot of the lenders. So by making that a single family attached, it takes that away. It's just one unit, one owner, and it makes it easier for everyone, including benefiting from true, appreciation of their property, be able to pass on that wealth, et cetera, where it was not restricted by it being a condo. of 3 or 4 units in many cases. The, what else was I gonna mention? And this is more of just comments. I think, you know, ADU by right, we all seem to be in agreement. That's the way that the state is going, and we want to also fulfill, but that does not take away, you know, still having to apply for a permit and everything like that. I just said, 'cause some people are afraid that people are just gonna put them up and there's not gonna be egress. I know all these things are gonna still have to go through the same process, just by right that you can build, but then you have to go through the process of submitting for a permit and making sure that you fulfill safety for these units. It's not just popping everybody's attic and basements without taking that consideration. And there was a couple of comments about this plan supporting the moving of the transit hub from Kennedy Plaza. I didn't take it that way, but I was a little taken aback that people are taking this as a stamp of approval from the commission when we shouldn't be opining necessarily on that. I think that our intent was to say that we want to support RIPTA's, expansion, RIPTA's servicing the community and enhancing our transportation, whether it's there, whether it's somewhere else. I don't think that it's really making an opinion that it has to stay there or move.
And I think that was the discussion when we had it around that mobility
Right.
chapter. It was, we want the best for the ridership and for it to go, to have the option of doing that, but it's, it's to be decided later.
Right. Right, so
And that's why you have the option in the plan to do so, but you don't have to.
Right, and I agree, and that's how I read it, but I just because it was brought up by so many people, I just want to make sure that when a record saying we're not supporting one way or the other, we're just supporting that RIPTA grows and expands to a way that's going to best serve the constituents and the residents of Providence and visitors alike. And I think that was it. I mean, other than that, I mean, I think there was a lot of time. There was a lot of community outreach, not just in this meeting, but obviously outside in the rec centers and the libraries. And this is just another iteration. It's now going to go to the city council, which is going to allow for more discussion as well.
Yes, and there are some other points that before we continue on, we do talk about surface parking lots discouraging them in this. And if people want to go further, there's nothing in this plan that says that we can't go further and abolish parking minimums. It clearly states that we should discourage parking minimums on new development. It clearly states it. I want to say personally, I fully support, and it states it in the comprehensive plan as well, incorporation of additional local historic districts. I can't say that enough. We support addition of properly formed local historic districts so that they have local protections. Putting a National Register district beyond the addendum, I don't think does anything but confuse the issue, because there is no citywide application where that can be applied for any local land use. But we're adding in 36 additional landmarks. Like that's huge. That's the biggest addition to the historic districts in the cities since, have we ever added 36 at one time?
Well, yes, we have, but,
Okay.
but it's significant. And I will say that the question, where did this come about? This was, Jason Martin, our preservation planner. And as I mentioned, these are the remaining individually listed National Register properties that hadn't previously been incorporated into local historic districts. Not all the properties within National Register districts, but it's the ones that are individually listed, which are the sort of, they're individually listed for a reason.
They are landmarks.
Yes, they are landmarks.
Yeah. The Sustainability Council, I implore you to continue your dialogue with the city council. I think we've done pretty well in the edits that were made, and the compromises. Again, this is all about compromise. There are people on both sides of each argument that are slightly unhappy with us, and maybe that means we're fair. Maybe that means that we're doing something that's getting a little bit here, a little bit there, but the other point is, it clearly states in the comprehensive plan that we support housing at all income levels, including all affordable levels. That is clearly stated in the comprehensive plan. And obviously we support that as well. So with that, I go back to my initial recommendations, and then the third would be allow for a 0 lot line, small lots for single family attached parentheses row house as it's commonly referred to. And with that, I would make a motion to approve to send to the city council.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. We'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Miguel?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You don't feel you need.
Thank you. And this process will continue. Now the heavy lifting is to be taken on by the counselors that we have. And this process will continue, and hopefully it gets approved at the city council level to a point where it doesn't have to come back to us for any discussion, but you never know. It's quite possible. All right, with that, we will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't feel you have to take public comment on your change?